Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of the Foster family. Christopher Foster had always been considered a success. His mother, Enid, described him as someone who actively pursued financial opportunities from an early age. Along with his younger brother, Andrew, he aspired to follow in the footsteps of their late father, who had been a sales manager. Although they both aimed to become successful businessmen, Chris and Andrew had had a tense relationship since they were children. Andrew later explained that Chris's confidence and assertiveness had overshadowed Andrew's quiet nature. Despite this, both brothers were very close to their mother, Enid. In 1987, Chris married Jill, a housewife, and they had their daughter Kirsty in 1993. Chris's path to wealth began in the late 80s when he worked as a mattress salesman and used inexpensive pizza boxes for insulation. His life changed dramatically after he founded a successful engineering company. This business made Chris a self-made millionaire through the development of an innovative insulation material that became essential in the oil industry. The Piper Alpha oil rig explosion on July 6, 1988, had led to a catastrophic fire that lasted for days and claimed the lives of 167 people. After watching the news, Chris saw an opportunity in this tragedy and identified a market niche for fireproof insulation specifically for oil and gas rigs. Although many oil companies showed interest, they wanted certification of the product's effectiveness before signing a contract. To prove its value, Chris took the financial risk of mortgaging his house to fund an experiment. The test was successful. His product, Overshield, showed exceptional resilience compared to other insulation materials when exposed to fire. It even received a rare A1 fire test rating. Major oil companies quickly placed orders, making Christopher Foster a millionaire almost overnight. Reports suggested that he earned so much money that he didn't know how to spend it all. As his business grew, Christopher's annual turnover increased significantly from £50,000 to £1 million. By 2004, Chris's net worth had been reported to be £10 million. That same year, his wife Jill noticed a house in Shropshire Life magazine. It was Usbaston House, a beautiful mansion in Maesbrook, a wealthy village in Shropshire, England. The estate was 16 acres in size, had its own lake and equestrian grounds. Despite being offered at around £1.5 million, the house still needed repairs. Jill was so intrigued that Chris made an offer the next morning. Foster's family quickly sold their house and moved to Usbaston House. Chris then invested a further £50,000 to install a swimming pool and landscape the property. After settling down, Chris led a lavish lifestyle. He bought 2 Porsches, one for himself and one for Jill, a James Bond-style Aston Martin, Range Rovers, and many other vehicles. Their daughter Kirsty attended a private boarding school and Chris also bought her several horses. Kirsty spent time with her horses when not at school and participated in equestrian competitions. Friends described her as quiet, thoughtful, and kind. In addition, Chris also bought 4 dogs and several pigeons. He further enhanced their lives by hiring a butler and a personal assistant, and the house had antique furniture worth more than £200,000. Chris's most expensive hobby was his passion for shooting, demonstrated by his expensive gun collection, each costing between £12,000 and £12,500, equivalent to nearly $20,000 at the time. Chris often attended shooting parties that could last 3 days, with bills running up to £8,000. He had a habit of leaving guns around the house. Occasionally, when pigeons made a mess of Chris's car, he would shoot them, much to Jill's frustration. In one disturbing incident, when Kirsty's black Labrador began disturbing the sheep, Chris was unable to control the dog and led it down a country road to shoot it in the head. Chris was a successful businessman but lacked a long-term vision. Notoriously impulsive, he craved instant gratification and was quick to cut ties with people who annoyed him. Chris enjoyed being admired and envied by others for his wealth, and social status was very important to him. Over time, both Chris and Jill moved up the social ladder, and it became clear to those close to Chris that he wanted to move away from his roots in Wolverhampton. Jill enjoyed shopping sprees and spent her days doing self-care activities like nail and hair appointments, along with beauty treatments like manicures and Botox injections. Chris and his family regularly went on luxury vacations, staying in luxury hotels and enjoying the best food. These lavish trips could sometimes cost up to £20,000 each, and Chris didn't hesitate to pay. However, unbeknownst to his friends and family, Chris had reached his financial limit and began withdrawing money from his business. His excessive spending had led to financial imbalance, with more money going out than coming in. In 2003, Chris had signed an exclusive contract with DRC, giving them the exclusive rights to produce his oil rig sealant. By 2004, his net worth had been reported to be £1 million. However, by 2005, he owed £2.8 million. Instead of cutting costs, Chris, due to his lavish spending habits, sought more money from other sources. Despite the exclusive agreement with DRC, he signed another contract with another company to sell his products. DRC discovered this infringement and sued Chris, resulting in a lawsuit and DRC acquiring Chris's patent. Chris went bankrupt, and in 2007, his company was dissolved. His assets worth £3 million were frozen and his salary was gone. Despite serious financial troubles, Chris continued to act as if nothing significant had happened. At the same time, Chris became involved in a dispute with his accountant, who reported him to the Inland Revenue for tax evasion. Chris had failed to pay VAT, national insurance, and various other taxes. To deal with his increasing tax obligations, he had to borrow from banks to ease his financial strain. In addition, he had mortgaged the Osbaston house 3 times and withdrawn money from more than 20 different bank accounts. Despite his lavish lifestyle and constant spending, Chris still tried to hide the fact that he was deeply in debt. Chris gradually found himself struggling with overwhelming challenges, aware that time was ticking away and fearful of losing everything. However, during a conversation with a friend about houses, Chris insisted that he would never sell Osbaston house. Struggling with the pressure to maintain his flashy and knowing that his time and money were running out, Chris repeatedly sought professional help. He confided in the doctor, revealing his feelings of depression and suicidal thoughts. He started taking antidepressants. In August 2008, Chris came across a letter from his house managers posted on the front gate. The letter reported that they planned to return the following Tuesday to reclaim the house and other assets. The housekeeper said that when she showed Chris the letter, Chris appeared confused but remained silent. The nightmare that Chris had been avoiding had now become a harsh reality. He was on the brink of losing all his material possessions. The thought of Kirsty and Jill losing their familiar lifestyle was unbearable for Christopher. His family faced the possibility of returning to Wolverhampton, saying goodbye to their lavish lifestyle. For a proud man like Chris, such a situation would have been extremely humiliating. On August 21, 2008, a friend contacted Chris via text message to ask about his health, and he replied, "Not good, things are about to happen to me." On August 25, 2008, the Foster's family received an invitation to a barbecue and clay pigeon shooting event. They then joined the gathering. None of the attendees noticed any signs of difficulty in the Fosters. Witnesses recalled that Chris appeared happy. Their family still exuded happiness without knowing what Chris had planned that night. Chris informed Jill that he wanted to leave the gathering. Although Jill wanted to stay a little longer, they eventually left around 8:30 p.m., arriving home just a few minutes later at 8:44 p.m., their route captured by home security footage. Soon after, Jill went to bed. At 11:30 p.m., Chris went upstairs to check on Kirsty, urging her to go to bed while continuing to text a friend online. Around midnight, Chris decided to turn off the internet, causing Kirsty to end her conversation with her friend and go to bed. At 3 a.m., Chris began his violent rampage. He entered Jill's room and used a silencer to shoot her in the head while she was sleeping. Next, he went to Kirsty's room and killed her in the same way. Home security cameras recorded Chris's actions as he carried a shotgun outside the dog cage, killing each dog with a shot to the head. He then went to the stables and killed the horses before burning the stables with the animals inside. Chris appeared expressionless in the video. To prevent firefighters from reaching the house, Chris blocked the main entrance, shooting at the tires to make movement more difficult. He also pumped 200 liters of oil from the family's tank into the house's basement through connecting pipes. It is clear that Chris took deliberate steps to completely destroy the Osbaston house. His actions appeared to have been motivated by a desire to prevent others from acquiring property that he could not keep. Chris burned down his house and covered his car and belongings in oil. The fire quickly spread and destroyed everything. Chris, still carrying a rifle, went back into the house and lay down next to Jill's body in the bedroom, holding her as flames engulfed them. At 4:11 a.m., the security cameras stopped working. A neighbor saw the growing fire and called for help. Firefighters quickly arrived. The fire was too intense and difficult to control. As firefighters tried to put out the fire, neighbors watched the building burn, worried for those inside. In the following days, the media called in to search for Foster's family, but all efforts were unsuccessful. Because of Chris's wealth, the authorities opened an investigation, initially suspecting that the Foster family had been kidnapped. However, at the time, neither the bodies nor the security footage were found, so many speculated about what might have happened to them. It took 3 days for the fire to be completely extinguished. After the fire was extinguished, investigators carefully examined the house and found the bodies of Jill and Christopher on beds in a room that had collapsed into the living room. However, there was no sign of Kirsty. While some hoped she could have escaped, others feared she had been kidnapped. Sadly, Kirsty's remains were found in the rubble a few days later. Investigators used a brush to carefully collect her remains into a hearse. A fragment of Kirsty's skull revealed that she had suffered a gunshot wound to the head, like her mother. After examining the body, the police began to suspect that Chris had committed a crime. At the same time, they began investigating his financial situation. When they dug deeper, they discovered that Chris, a seemingly successful businessman, was actually heavily in debt. His total debt had reached £4 million, and when creditors tried to take his assets, they discovered that Chris had intended to demolish the house to ensure that there was nothing left for them to take. Security footage confirmed the police's suspicions. Chris committed the murders and took his own life without leaving any explanation or warning. Speculation about the motives behind the brutal crime led to 2 main theories. One theory had suggested that Chris, feeling ashamed of having lost his fortune, chose to commit the heinous act to avoid admitting his failures. Another theory had proposed that Chris, being self-centered, decided to destroy everything rather than face the possibility of loss. However, Enid had disagreed with these theories. She had firmly believed that Chris acted out of love for his family, trying to protect them from financial ruin. She had defended him and felt a deep sense of sympathy for his situation. In contrast, Chris's brother Andrew had held a very different view. Despite not speaking for 16 years, Andrew had briefly considered reconciling with Chris for their mother's sake. However, his fear of a hostile encounter had kept him from reaching out. Andrew had alleged that Chris had bullied and sexually assaulted him during their childhood, leading to a tumultuous relationship. Andrew had maintained that Chris exhibited bullying and controlling behavior. Andrew's attempts to reconcile with Chris in 1999 had been met with resistance. Chris had responded to Andrew's letter with a demand for a written apology, stating that Andrew would have to beg and scrape on bended knee to make amends. Andrew had believed that Chris refused to acknowledge his past wrongdoings and instead held on to long-standing grudges. For months after the tragedy, on December 19, 2008, a joint funeral had been held for 15-year-old Kirsty and 49-year-old Jill at their local village church. The service had been quiet and respectful, attended by close friends and family. Both Kirsty and Jill had been buried in the same plot, as requested by Jill's family. Chris had received a private funeral and was buried elsewhere. In the years following the tragedy, the remains of the burnt-out house and the family's charred belongings had been left on the site. These had included Kirsty's first aid book for her horses and a handwritten note detailing the family's meal plans for the week of the tragedy. The ruins of the house had remained until 2011 when the debris had been cleared. The 16-acre estate had been sold in 2014, with plans to build a new 6-bedroom house. Although the property had been put up for sale in 2012, it had taken 2 years to sell, reportedly after the price had been reduced. The reasons behind Christopher Foster's actions may have been financial struggles and the pressure to maintain a wealthy image. However, this had not justified the horrific outcome. Instead of having made sensible financial decisions or confiding in his loved ones, Chris had chosen a destructive path that had had devastating consequences for everyone involved. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Adam Strong. Adam Strong was born in 1972 in Cornwall, a small town in Stormont County, Ontario. Little is known about his family and early life. He remained single and childless, working as a gas station attendant and a security guard on film sets. Those who knew him described Adam as quirky and eccentric, often coming across as superior to others. He enjoyed debating and arguing to prove his point, but was not typically confrontational. A review of his social media profiles revealed Adam's interest in BDSM practices, which he openly discussed and shared photos and videos about. Although he never had a long-term partner, some former partners accused him of being a sadist who subjected them to physical and emotional abuse, leading to the end of their relationships. Adam also had a peculiar hobby of writing reviews of adult films and magazines. It appeared that watching such content was a significant part of his free time. Despite his unusual interests, Adam presented himself as a calm and composed individual, showing no outward signs of a troubled or criminal nature. The story took an unexpected turn 4 months later when at the end of December, when David Wood's family moved into the house at 19 Macmillan Drive in Oshawa, they were immediately struck by a strange and unpleasant smell. Their downstairs neighbor, Adam Strong, a 45-year-old single man who lived in the other half of the house, reassured them that it was just a minor plumbing issue that he would fix within a few days. Although Adam was friendly and polite in his communication, there was something unsettling about him that put the Wood family on edge. When David's wife tried to welcome him with some homemade cookies, Adam wouldn't even let her into his apartment. Instead, he stepped out into the hallway, closing his door behind him. In that brief moment, David's wife caught a glimpse of Adam's living space, which was in disarray, and the smell inside was overpowering and foul. Adam borrowed cookies from his new neighbor and quickly left. Later, when they met in the yard, he apologized for not inviting her in, explaining that his apartment was a mess due to upcoming renovations. Despite his efforts to be polite, he seemed nervous. As the Wood family settled into their new home, they tried to ignore a persistent smell. However, on December 29th, they called a plumber to fix a sewer blockage, which had intensified the stench. The problem seemed minor, but what the workers found in the pipes shocked even experienced forensic experts. Plumber Sean Funn and his partner began to clear the blockage in the Woods' apartment. Although they were accustomed to unpleasant odors, they were surprised by the terrible smell inside. They soon realized they needed to investigate further and descended to the apartment below, which belonged to a man named Adam. Adam reluctantly let the workers in, apologizing for the mess. The smell was even worse in his apartment, and when the plumbers reached the source of the blockage, the stench became unbearable. Sean, a seasoned plumber, had never encountered anything as foul-smelling as this in his years of practice. However, an even more disturbing discovery awaited him and his team when they decided to clear the pipe. Adam, already on edge, became increasingly agitated, refusing to step away and bombarding the workers with questions about their methods and estimated time of completion. He later claimed he was simply curious, having never witnessed this process before. The specialists tried to brush off his behavior, but their efforts were soon overshadowed by the gruesome discovery of over 10 kilograms of flesh, hair, and bone fragments in the pipes. Sean was horrified to find disfigured and partially decomposed human fingers among the debris. Adam feigned surprise, claiming he had never seen anything so disgusting, and then asked the plumbers if they had any idea how this could have ended up in the sewer pipe. Sean decided to call the police immediately to report the disturbing discovery. He informed them that he had likely found human remains and provided the address. He made sure Adam didn't touch or disturb anything, preserving the evidence. When the officers arrived, they quickly confirmed that Sean's suspicions were correct. Human flesh had been extracted from the pipes. The police then spoke with the Adam. He admitted that a woman's body had been stuck in the pipe. He even revealed that other body parts were stored in his refrigerator's freezer. Upon investigation, the police found a severed head and limb fragments packed in plastic bags, which were too large. The house was extremely filthy and cluttered, with a kitchen filled with dirty dishes and rotting food, as well as trash covering the floor. Empty pizza boxes were scattered around, and numerous magazines of an explicit and masochistic nature were present among the mess. Various adult toys, gags, whips, handcuffs, and restraint devices were also discovered. Adam Strong was arrested at the scene and taken to the police station for questioning. His arrest puzzled the authorities, as he had no prior run-ins with the law and was not a person of interest to the police. Mr. Adam had resided at 19 Macmillan Drive in Oshawa for over 10 years, dating back to 2007, without incident or complaints from neighbors. The House of Horrors at 19 Macmillan Drive, Adam's residence, was secured and guarded as a crime scene. An initial inspection revealed a complex and time-consuming process lay ahead, with investigators expecting to uncover more shocking evidence. The discovery of a head in the refrigerator was just the beginning. Evidence found at the scene led law enforcement to suspect a connection to Rory Hash, whose torso had been recovered from a body of water 4 months earlier. A tattoo on the neck and subsequent DNA analysis confirmed that the discovered remains belonged to Rory. Further investigation revealed blood-stained clothing and shoes belonging to she, hidden among trash in various rooms of the house. The bedroom was particularly disturbing, with blood traces found on the bed, walls, furniture, and ceiling. These bloodstains were later confirmed to belong to a missing schoolgirl. A dissection table was also found in the kitchen, suggesting it was used to dismember and gut the victim. The entire scene was gruesome, with blood, skin particles, hair, and bone fragments scattered everywhere, causing nausea in those who witnessed it. The bathroom was extremely dirty and unsanitary, with signs of a violent crime visible everywhere, including dirt, blood, and broken fixtures. The toilet was dismantled and lay in a corner, surrounded by garbage. It appeared that the perpetrator, Adam, had attempted to dispose of a body by cutting it into pieces and flushing them down the sewer. However, he encountered a blockage and, when his attempt to fix it failed, left the scene in disarray. Inside the house, a large number of sharp objects were discovered, which likely had been used to dismember the victim. Some of the objects, including knives, still had blood on them. Further analysis of the evidence, including DNA samples, revealed that Adam had semen on fragments of the victim's body, which had been found in the refrigerator. Rory Hash was born on July 9, 1999, in Oshawa, Ontario, to Shannon Dion, a single mother. Rory's father was not present in her life, having left before her birth. Despite this, Rory grew up in a loving and supportive family environment provided by her mother and maternal grandmother. Rory's family had an unconventional background, with her maternal grandfather founding and leading the motorcycle club Satan's Choice. He was also a skilled boxer with connections to organized crime. Additionally, Rory's uncle was a member of the Hells Angels motorcycle club and led a troubled life, frequently encountering legal issues. However, this did not affect Rory's childhood, which was remarkably peaceful and carefree. Rory excelled academically and had a passion for dance, winning awards in competitions. Those who knew her described her as intelligent, responsible, and compassionate. At the age of 13, Rory earned top honors as a cadet in her local army unit, showcasing her exceptional qualities from a young age. At 15, Rory's life took a downward turn. A friend introduced her to drugs, and she quickly became addicted. She started spending time with the wrong crowd, neglected her schoolwork, and eventually stopped attending school altogether. For about a year, her family tried to help her overcome her addiction by sending her to various treatment centers, but she relapsed each time. At 17, Rory ran away from home and began working in the sex trade to support her habit. Rory eventually sought help from a specialized service for teenagers struggling with addiction. With their support, she was able to enter mandatory treatment and turn her life around. She found a job at a local shop, studied remotely to earn her high school diploma, and even started thinking about attending college. Rory also started a serious relationship with a boy named Anthony, and they decided to move in together in the spring of 2017. When Rory discovered she was pregnant, she was nearly 18 and felt ready to take on the responsibility of motherhood. Her mother supported her decision, but was unaware that Rory had started using illicit substances again. In mid-August, Rory met with Crane at a shopping center. Crane had been keeping an eye on her for 18 months to ensure she didn't fall back into her old habits. During their meeting, Rory revealed that she had started using drugs again and had lost her job a month prior. She also admitted to exchanging intimate favors for money or drugs. Crane was deeply concerned and promised to help. He asked Rory to wait while he made a call to arrange for her to be hospitalized. However, when he returned, Rory was gone. The next day, Rory's mother and uncle took her to the hospital after finding her in a state of incoherence due to substance use. They left her in the emergency room queue for about an hour, but when they returned, Rory was nowhere to be found. Security footage showed that she had simply gotten up and walked out of the hospital. Her family reported her missing the following day, but despite a thorough search and widespread social media attention, Rory was never seen again. Rory's exact circumstances of arrival at Adam's house are unknown, but it is probable that she went there seeking drugs in exchange for sex. The investigation started when Adam informed the police about the location of Rory's remaining body parts. Initially, investigators anticipated Adam would admit to the crime, but when he was taken to the station, he became uncooperative, refused to answer questions, and denied any involvement in Rory's death, all while remaining calm. The only charge filed against Adam was desecration of a body, as there was not enough direct evidence to link him to the murder. Despite his lawyer's efforts, Adam was not granted bail and stayed in jail until his trial. Investigators attempted to get Adam to reveal more information by provoking an emotional response, but he remained cautious and avoided discussing Rory's visit to his house and his potential involvement in her death. However, Adam freely talked about his interest in bladed weapons and his large collection of knives. A search of Adam's house uncovered a significant piece of evidence, a dirty hunting knife hidden in a closet with dried skin fragments that appeared to be human. DNA testing revealed that the samples on the knife did not match Rory's, but belonged to someone else. It took several months to identify the person, but by July 2017, investigators had confirmed that the DNA on the knife belonged to Candace Fitzpatrick, she who had gone missing about 10 years earlier. Candace shared many similarities with Rory Hash. Both struggled with addiction and had run-ins with the law. They came from troubled families and often ran away from home, sometimes disappearing for months at a time. To survive, they would often exchange sex for food and other necessities. Candace was born in 1989 and was 18 when she disappeared. Her family did not realize she was missing until almost 2 years later, by which time any potential leads had gone cold. Many people believed that Candace's lifestyle and social circle meant she could have gone anywhere. For 10 years, her parents thought she might have run away and would eventually return home. However, news from law enforcement in 2018 destroyed their hope of ever seeing their daughter alive again. A striking feature of the case was the physical resemblance between Candace and another victim, who was the same age. The police believed they had caught a serial offender. The suspect, Adam, also confessed to harming Candace. However, Adam refused to provide information about Rory unless the police agreed to improve his prison conditions. He wanted a private cell, a large TV, internet, and his favorite meals. Although law enforcement was outraged by Adam's demands, they agreed in order to gain valuable information. Adam began by sharing his troubled childhood, revealing that he was abused by his stepfather from age 5 and started harming animals at age 7, deriving physical pleasure from these acts. He also discussed his unusual intimate preferences and expressed frustration at not finding a partner who shared these interests. When discussing Rory, Adam described in detail how he had dismembered her, seemingly taking pleasure in the act, but later regretted his plumbing had failed him. However, when questioned by police, Adam denied responsibility for her death, claiming she had died from an overdose and he had only disposed of the body. When asked about Candace, a case from 10 years prior, Adam was caught off guard and attempted to learn how the police had discovered the connection. Upon hearing about the human remains found on an old knife, Adam became subdued and regretted not taking better precautions to avoid detection. He admitted to meeting Candace but denied killing her. Despite a lack of evidence to support his claims, Adam unintentionally incriminated himself during the investigation. In an attempt to gain sympathy, he shared his account of events. However, when informed that the victim, Rory, was pregnant at the time of her death, Adam strongly denied this fact. The police noted that the pregnancy was in its early stages, and therefore not visibly apparent. Adam claimed that he would have noticed if she was pregnant, sparking a realization among the investigators that he would stop at nothing to argue his point. To uncover more information, the police told Adam that Rory was pregnant, which led him to attempt to prove the contrary. In his eagerness to refute this, he shared graphic details about how he had personally examined her body and held her reproductive organs in his hands. Adam's account was detailed and included his physical sensations, describing the flesh as soft and warm. At one point, he even mentioned feeling a pulse. These statements raised suspicions that Rory may have still been alive at the time. Unfortunately for Adam, his entire narrative was captured on camera, and his incriminating statements were presented as evidence in court. When confronted about his earlier statements, Adam tried to retract his previous admissions, but it was too late. The defendant, Adam Strong, refused to reveal what he had done with Candace's body, and despite extensive searches, her remains were never found. Investigators also failed to identify any other potential victims. During one of the final interrogations, Strong showed no remorse, saying, "I don't know if it matters, but I'd like to extend my condolences to her parents." During the trial, Strong's lawyers argued that he was mentally ill and therefore not responsible for his actions, claiming he needed medical treatment rather than punishment. However, the court had to decide whether he was sane and accountable for his crimes or if he should be committed to a psychiatric facility instead of serving time in prison. A psychiatric evaluation found that although Strong had certain mental health disorders, he was aware of his actions and could be held legally responsible. Strong's trial began in September 2020, 3 years after Rory's death and 12 years after Candace disappeared. He was charged with 2 counts of murder and desecration of Rory's remains. Although he never admitted guilt, the evidence found in his home and his statements during interrogations confirmed his involvement in these horrific crimes. 4 of Adam's former partners testified against him, describing his cruel and violent behavior. The prosecution presented evidence that Adam had lured 2 women to his home with promises of money in exchange for intimate services that catered to his specific preferences. Once they were in his home, he would immobilize and torment them for an extended period. In the case of Rory, he likely killed her during the ordeal because he feared she would report him to the police. On September 4th, a signal from Adam's phone was detected near the city harbor, where he had discarded Rory's torso, hoping the current would carry it away. In April 2021, Adam Strong was found guilty of murdering Candace Fitzpatrick and Rory Hash, as well as desecrating Rory's remains. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Adam showed little remorse, stating that his prison cell was an improvement over his previous living conditions. 6 months after his sentencing, Adam unexpectedly revealed the location of Candace's remains. Following his directions, the police conducted a months-long search that ultimately led to the discovery of human bones. DNA testing confirmed the skeleton's identity as young Candace Fitzpatrick, and this was officially announced. Investigators now strongly suspect that there may be at least one more female victim in the Adam case. During Adam's initial interrogation, his personal belongings were seized, including a chain with 3 rings. Adam asked for the chain's return, explaining that the rings held sentimental value and he didn't want to lose them. Relatives of Rory and Candace later identified 2 of the rings as belonging to their daughters, but the origin of the 3rd ring remains unknown. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Samadi Fonseca Fernandez. Samadi was born in Costa Rica in February 1975. Her family and early life are not well documented. She spent her childhood in an area called Cuba, where she lived with her mother, Sonia Fonseca. Samadi attended a local school, where she demonstrated a challenging and conflicted personality from an early age. She had difficulty accepting rejection and often used force or deception to get what she wanted. People who knew her recall that Samadi's striking appearance and perfect figure made it easy for her to charm men, but she struggled to maintain relationships. Her beauty and charisma were matched by her greed and vanity, which led her to prioritize material wealth and self-interest above all else. This attitude often discouraged potential partners. Additionally, Samadi became intensely jealous and aggressive after brief relationships. Samadi's doll-like appearance led to her working as a Barbie lookalike at a large Universal bookstore for several years. This earned her a flattering nickname that stuck with her throughout her life. After high school, Samadi had in love with a successful local TV journalist named Osvaldo Fernando Ballery, who was 16 years her senior. Samadi had a long and serious relationship with Osvaldo, with whom she had 2 children, Christopher and Christina. However, due to constant scandals and jealousy, they separated in 2012. After Osvaldo's sudden death, it was discovered that he had not included Samadi in his will. Samadi took matters into her own hands and seized Osvaldo's house, changing the locks to prevent his relatives and heirs from entering. She also took some valuable items that belonged to Osvaldo. His family members were outraged and went to court to accuse Samadi of theft. The police eventually forced Samadi to leave the house, but she was not charged with a crime. Samadi had other relationships, including one with Miguel Angel Perez, with whom she had a daughter named Maria. This relationship was reportedly official, but ended in divorce after a few years. Samadi allegedly gave her youngest daughter her lover's surname without his knowledge or consent, contradicting claims that she was unmarried at the time. Interestingly, some of her lovers have mysteriously disappeared or died under unclear circumstances, yet this trend went unnoticed for a long time. For instance, one of Samadi's lovers went missing shortly after deciding to end their relationship with the reportedly temperamental and aggressive woman. Despite relative suspicions of her involvement, his disappearance remains unsolved due to lack of concrete evidence. Another former lover, Diaco, met a tragic end after breaking up with Samadi. His murder was initially attributed to a botched robbery, but the perpetrators were never caught. Speculations about Samadi's role in the crime persisted, albeit without solid proof. Her most notable alleged victim was Gerardo Cruz, a Costa Rican native born in December 1992 in San Jose. Gerardo never knew his biological father, who left the family before his birth. His mother, Ana Patricia, later married Hermes Rodriguez, who adopted and raised Gerardo as his own. Gerardo's younger sister, Milena, was born a few years after him. He had a peaceful and carefree childhood and youth. Gerardo attended a regular school, enjoyed motorcycles, and met his true love, Carol, at a young age. By 23, he, Carol, and their 4-year-old daughter Genesis moved into his aunt and uncle's house in San Sebastian, a suburb of the city. Gerardo took a job at a local bakery to support his family. They were happy, especially with the news of a second child on the way. In the summer of 2015, Gerardo met Samadi, a 40-year-old woman who regularly visited the bakery. She was attractive, fashionably dressed, and flirtatious. As Samadi aged, she began to have relationships with younger men, likely flattered by their attention. Despite their nearly 20-year age difference, Gerardo became infatuated with Samadi and started secretly meeting with her. She visited the bakery almost daily, catching the attention of other employees. Samadi often brought her 19-year-old daughter, Christina, to the bakery. Initially, Gerardo balanced his family life and secret meetings with Samadi without either woman knowing about the other. However, Gerardo soon let his guard down, boasting to friends and colleagues about his relationship with Samadi, describing her as a terrific mistress who spoiled him with gifts. Rumors about Gerardo's affair soon reached his mother, who attempted to persuade him to end the relationship. The affair was short-lived, ending in October 2015, when Samadi discovered that his mistress, Gerardo, was married with a pregnant wife and a young daughter. Upon learning this, Samadi became enraged. She began harassing Carol, Gerardo's wife, with threatening calls and messages, warning her that Gerardo would be harmed if he didn't return to her exclusively. Gerardo apologized to his wife and reconciled, keeping their family intact. He underestimated Samadi's malice, thinking she would move on and calm down after the breakup. However, Samadi's vindictiveness was more intense than Gerardo anticipated. Shortly after the breakup, Gerardo witnessed a disturbing incident. While walking downtown, Gerardo noticed an older man secretly filming under a young girl's mini-skirt with his phone. Outraged, Gerardo took out his phone to record the scene. He then approached she, told her what was happening, and advised her to report the incident to the police. Gerardo chased the man for about 2 minutes, trying to get a clear shot of his face on camera. During the chase, Gerardo asked loudly if the man was enjoying taking photos of his sister's underwear without their consent. The man eventually jumped into a taxi and escaped. That night, Gerardo posted the video on his social media page, and it quickly went viral. Internet users identified the man as Luis Solmano Delgado, a former Ministry of Finance employee. As a result, Gerardo became a national celebrity, giving daily interviews to newspapers and appearing on TV and radio shows. He condemned Delgado's actions and stated that he had no regrets about exposing him. However, Delgado's lawyers began working against Gerardo, accusing him of violating the law by distributing the video. They prepared a lawsuit against him, which left Gerardo surprised and confused. He couldn't understand why he was being judged for exposing his actions, rather than the man being held accountable for his behavior. Gerardo's last interview was on October 7th at a local radio station. Feeling confident and believing he had nothing to hide, he spoke openly. The following day, Gerardo had plans to meet his friend Oswald after work, but he suddenly canceled, citing an unexpected emergency. It was later revealed that he had received a message from Samadi, luring him to the park that evening under the pretext of another interview. Gerardo had no reason to suspect anything was amiss and trusted his former lover. After finishing work, he went to the agreed meeting point, but instead of journalists, two unknown men were waiting. They took his bag, assaulted him, stabbed him multiple times in the chest and stomach, and then fled. Before losing consciousness, Gerardo managed to call a friend and report the incident. The friend immediately alerted the police and medical services. Thanks to the swift response, Gerardo was rushed to the hospital, where doctors fought to save his life for 42 days. He underwent numerous operations, but unfortunately, they were unable to save him. Gerardo passed away on November 19th in the intensive care unit. Initially, multiple theories emerged about the crime. The first theory suggested it was a robbery murder. Gerardo was indeed attacked in a park at night, his bag was stolen, and he was stabbed with a knife, which made it appear to be a typical theft. However, just a few days before, Gerardo had released a sensational video that compromised a well-known former government official, leading to a second theory, that the murder was an act of revenge. The media openly speculated that the former government official may have hired hitmen to kill the young man who had damaged his reputation. The murder sparked intense debate in the press, with protesters demanding that the perpetrators be caught and brought to justice. The police explored various theories, searching for other potential enemies of Gerardo. For months, the investigation stalled. However, in May 2016, a breakthrough came when footage from a street surveillance camera was discovered. The video showed two men fleeing the scene where Gerardo was fatally attacked. These individuals immediately became the prime suspects, and the police worked to identify and apprehend them. The footage proved to be crucial evidence, and once it was made public, the case started to move forward. It was repeatedly shown on news programs, with viewers asked to take a close look as the individuals could be dangerous. Police created rough sketches of the suspects and described their physical characteristics. One of the suspects soon came forward, hoping that cooperating with the investigation would lead to a reduced sentence. The information provided by the cooperating suspect led investigators to several accomplices and the crime's organizers, Samadi and her daughter Christina. All individuals involved in the crime were eventually taken into custody. Those arrested included Ronald Archie, a cab driver who helped locate the perpetrators, Cesar Chavez, a laborer who acted as an intermediary, and Omar Costa, a young miner who directly participated in the attack and had been tracking the victim on the day of the incident. The investigation revealed the roles and connections of all parties involved through phone records and text messages. Samadi, who had meticulously planned the crime, had enlisted the help of her daughter Christina. Together, they recruited friends Ronald and Cesar to find hitmen to kill Gerardo, staging it to look like a botched robbery in a nighttime park. They were later joined by Omar, who was responsible for ensuring the victim went to the pre-arranged location. Samadi personally chose October 7th as the date for the massacre. On that day, she was in frequent contact with all parties involved, assigning roles and verifying that everyone adhered to the plan. Gerardo was attacked, stabbed multiple times, and robbed of his bag and jacket. These stolen items were later given to the police as evidence. The primary evidence against Samadhi was a series of text messages detailing the murder plan and each participant's role. Samadhi was so confident she wouldn't get caught that she didn't bother deleting the incriminating messages. Her motive for the crime was jealousy. She didn't want to share her lover with his wife. If she couldn't have him, no one would. She carefully planned the crime, involving her own daughter, who assisted her throughout. Samadhi and her daughter were immediately arrested, with no possibility of bail due to the risk of them fleeing the country. Their accomplices were also detained, except for Omar, the youngest participant, who was handed over to juvenile authorities. The investigation spanned a year and a half, concluding in December 2017 when the trial of all parties involved in the criminal conspiracy commenced. It was revealed that Samadhi had a history of run-ins with the law, including a prior arrest for forging documents to obtain state benefits, for which she received only a fine. New information also emerged about Miguel Angel Perez, ex-husband of Samadhi. It was discovered that Samadhi had given their child Perez's surname without his consent. She then successfully petitioned the court to order him to pay child support, which he did for over 3 years. However, it was later uncovered that the entire process had been fraudulent. As a result, Samadhi was sentenced to 3 years in prison and a substantial fine. During the trial, Gerardo's wife testified that she had been aware of his affair with Samadhi. She stated that Samadhi had threatened Gerardo with death, but he had not taken these threats seriously. The primary motive behind the crime, as previously stated, was Samadhi's jealousy and wounded pride, stemming from her inability to accept that her younger lover had chosen to remain with his wife. Thanks to phone records, it was discovered that the mother and daughter had planned the crime together. Additionally, after the release of the CCTV footage showing the killers, Christine had a nervous breakdown. She called her mother, sobbing, and was close to going to the police to confess. However, her mother calmed her down, assuring her that the investigation would not lead to them. The verdict was announced on January 23, 2018. According to the court's decision, Samadhi was sentenced to 30 years in prison, while Christina, Ronald, and Caesar each received 25-year prison sentences. One of the killers was sent to a juvenile detention center, and the other had not been found at the time. Omar, who had been stalking the victim, was acquitted. The victim's family was awarded $140,000 in compensation for their loss. After the verdict, the family expressed gratitude to the court for the fair punishment of Gerardo's killers. However, it soon became known that Samadhi and Christina's lawyers had filed an appeal to reduce their sentences. As a result, each participant's sentence was reduced by 5 years. Samadhi is currently serving her 25-year sentence in a Costa Rican women's prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kelsey Smith. Kelsey Smith was born on May 3, 1989, in Overland Park, Kansas. Kelsey was the third of 5 children in a close-knit family. Her parents, Gregory and Missy Smith, raised her alongside her siblings, Steve, Lindsay, Kat, and Zach. Gregory Smith, the family patriarch, was a retired U.S. Navy veteran and had served in the police force for over 20 years. He was enjoying his retirement after a long and dedicated career. Kelsey grew up in a loving family environment, close to all her siblings. Kelsey's mother, Missy Smith, has dedicated her life to health care, working at a local hospital for many years. Despite her busy career, she has managed to balance work and family life well, raising her children and creating a warm family environment. Kelsey has been an active, outgoing, and creative child since she was a child. She enjoyed singing, dancing, and playing musical instruments, which she learned in music school. She was also active in school theater and choir performances. Kelsey is also passionate about sports, especially gymnastics and soccer. She often attends sporting events with her father and brother, cheering on her local team. With a great sense of humor and many talents, Kelsey has left a deep impression on those around her. Her love for animals, which began in childhood, inspired her dream of becoming a veterinarian after college. During her senior year of high school, Kelsey found work at the local symphony orchestra, where she played the clarinet at various city events. Through this job, she set a goal of saving enough money within 6 months to buy her first car, a 1987 Buick Regal. Although her parents were concerned that the car was an older model, they offered to contribute to the cost so that Kelsey could buy a newer car from the family budget. However, Kelsey was determined to buy her first car herself, using only her own savings, so she turned down their offer. The Kelsey family prioritized providing their children with a well-rounded education, focusing on education and personal development. They also instilled in their children a strong sense of discipline. The family had clear rules that everyone followed without exception, including sharing their plans and notifying each other if they would be out late. Kelsey demonstrates her adherence to these rules by being punctual, sharing her whereabouts with her parents, and informing them of her social activities. During her senior year, Kelsey began a romantic relationship with John Smith. She describes it as deeply in love and like the relationships depicted in books or movies. They celebrated New Year's 2007 together and have been virtually inseparable ever since. John, who is 1 year older than her, appears to be a responsible and caring partner who treats Kelsey with respect. Both sets of parents approve of their relationship. In May 2007, Kelsey turned 18, graduated from high school, and was accepted into a prestigious university in Kansas to study veterinary medicine. This was one of the happiest times of her life. However, these happy days did not last long. Kelsey attended parties with her classmates to celebrate the end of high school and enjoyed spending time with John. At this point, Kelsey had achieved everything she wanted, got into her dream college, and was in a fulfilling relationship with a wonderful partner who was planning to propose. Her life was bright and happy. However, her disappearance from a shopping mall parking lot on June 2, 2007 changed everything. Kelsey and her boyfriend John were about to celebrate a big milestone, 6 months of dating. To make it special, John planned to propose with a custom-made engagement ring and had booked a romantic dinner for they of them. Unaware of John's plans, Kelsey also wanted to surprise him with a gift. That Saturday, she got ready, drove to a nearby Target Corporation store, and called her mother around 7 p.m. to say she had found the gift but needed a special bag for it. Her mother suggested checking the mall across the street from Target Corporation for a romantic gift bag. Kelsey thanked her mother for the advice and promised to be home soon. John was supposed to pick her up at 8 o'clock. However, after that conversation with her mother never heard from Kelsey again. Kelsey failed to return home. When John arrived at 8 with a large bouquet of flowers, he was shocked and frightened to discover Kelsey's absence. Her parents were equally terrified, as it was unlike Kelsey to ignore phone calls and texts. She had vanished in a busy area during the daytime, and no one had witnessed her disappearance. Kelsey's father and 2 eldest siblings began searching for her. They found her car parked at the Oak Park Mall, which gave them a glimmer of hope that she might still be inside the mall for some unknown reason. However, after thoroughly searching the mall, inquiring with salespeople and security guards, they concluded that Kelsey was not there. Upon returning to the car, they found it undisturbed with no signs of struggle or violence. Kelsey's father, a former police officer, decided not to touch anything to preserve potential evidence, as the car might be part of a crime scene. Kelsey's parents reported her missing to the police the same day, but the police were initially hesitant to start searching right away. They explained that since Kelsey was 18, she wouldn't be considered missing until 24 hours had passed. However, Kelsey's father, who had connections, insisted on an immediate search. He also asked hospitals in the city if a woman matching Kelsey's description had been admitted. That evening, The police interviewed Kelsey's family and John to confirm their whereabouts and rule them out as suspects, a standard procedure in missing person cases. The police also reviewed surveillance footage from the Target store, which showed Kelsey entering the store, browsing, making a purchase, and leaving while talking on the phone to her mother. She was asking her mother about a gift bag and then drove to the Oak Park Mall across the street, as her mother suggested. Kelsey parked her car near the side entrance of the mall, close to the wall. Her car was inspected by experts and appeared to be untouched from the outside. The gift for John was on the passenger seat, and her backpack with personal items, including a tablet and wallet with $300 in cash, was in the back. Since everything was still inside, robbery was quickly ruled out as a motive. It appears Kelsey only left with her credit cards and phone as everything else was still in the car. There were no signs of struggle, blood, or damage, and the only unknown fingerprint was found on the driver's seatbelt, which did not belong to Kelsey, her family, or boyfriend. The investigation tried to track Kelsey's location through her mobile phone signal, but the device was inaccessible, possibly turned off or damaged. Despite this, it was possible to determine the last known location of the phone to narrow the search area. However, Verizon Communications, the wireless carrier, delayed providing the necessary data for several days. Instead of refusing to cooperate, the company kept promising to look into the matter, which effectively slowed down the process. In 2007, telecom companies were permitted to keep subscriber information from law enforcement, including police and FBI, without a court order. They based this on data protection laws. Not even situations where someone's life was in danger were exempt from this rule. A closer look at surveillance footage revealed a disturbing detail: a mysterious stranger was stalking Kelsey. The man initially did not attract attention because he kept a safe distance and did not interact directly with Kelsey. He was a Caucasian man between the ages of 20 and 25 with dark hair, short and a light beard, wearing a plain white t-shirt and black shorts. He followed Kelsey into the Target store about 30 seconds and continued to follow her from a distance as she browsed the various sections. The surveillance cameras captured his movements, and his behavior was later described by the prosecution as similar to a predator stalking its prey. After Kelsey left the store, the man followed her to the Oak Park parking lot in his Chevrolet truck, waiting until she was alone. It's possible that he overheard her conversation with her mother, as he was standing close by while she was on the phone. This may have allowed him to learn about her plans to visit the nearby shopping center. Unfortunately, Kelsey had parked her car in a poorly lit spot, next to a side door and a storage area, which made it difficult for the cameras to capture what happened next. As Kelsey sat in her car, the man parked his truck beside her and got out, wearing the same white t-shirt and black shorts. The stranger came up to her on the driver's side and, likely threatening to harm her, forced her to get behind the wheel of his Chevrolet. The truck then drove away in an unknown direction. Due to Gregory Smith's connections and experience, he believed that the more attention and coverage the case received, the higher the chances of finding their daughter and bringing the perpetrator to justice. As a result, the story was featured in both national and international media, including the popular show America's Most Wanted. When surveillance footage showed the stranger following Kelsey, the clearest images of his face were broadcast on the news, urging viewers to come forward if they recognized him. The police received calls from people claiming to have seen the man in various cities and states, although most of these reports turned out to be incorrect. Each lead was investigated. On June 6, a woman named Mrs. Miggs called the police, stating that she recognized her neighbor, Edwin Hall, from the footage. Initially, she had hesitated to report it due to doubts, but the information about the truck removed her last doubts, as Edwin owned an old 1970s Chevrolet. On June 6, 2007, two significant events occurred in the investigation. The police received crucial data from Verizon Communications about the last known location of Kelsey's phone signal. This information pinpointed a specific cell tower, allowing the police to establish a 1.1-mile search radius to the north. Within 45 minutes of starting the search, Kelsey's body was found in the brush near Longview Lake, Missouri, about 30 meters from where she was abducted. The medical examiners determined that she had been brutally assaulted and strangled with her own belt. Kelsey's body was discovered without clothing, except for the belt used to strangle her. Her body was carelessly discarded in the bushes, partially covered with dry branches. Over the 4 days it lay exposed to the June sun, her remains were severely disfigured by insects and wildlife, making them almost unrecognizable. Despite the state of her remains, the examination confirmed that the body was indeed Kelsey Smith. The second major event on June 6 was the arrest of the main suspect. When police arrived at his residence, he remained calm and acknowledged that his friends called him Jack. He agreed to provide a statement at the police station. During the interrogation, Edwin Hull claimed he had never seen Kelsey before, even when shown a photograph of her. When presented with surveillance footage from the store that showed him following her, he insisted that he had only visited Target for personal reasons and hadn't noticed her. He suggested that their appearance together in the footage was just a strange coincidence. Despite being shown irrefutable evidence, Edwin seemed confident that he had covered his tracks and couldn't be held accountable. He had thoroughly cleaned his van and had used protection during the assault, leaving no DNA evidence behind. However, Edwin agreed to cooperate with the investigation and provided his DNA sample and fingerprints. A crucial piece of evidence emerged when his fingerprints matched those found on Kelsey's car's seatbelt buckle. A thorough search of his home also revealed a hidden air pistol with Kelsey's DNA on the barrel. Edwin was officially charged with abduction, assault, and murder. A jurisdictional issue arose, as Kelsey was abducted in Kansas but her body was found dead in Missouri. This was important because it affected the potential sentence. In Missouri, Edwin faced the possibility of a capital punishment trial and sentence. Edwin realized the seriousness of his situation and, after consulting his lawyer, decided to confess to the crime and provide details in the hope of a reduced sentence. He described how he had noticed Kelsey entering the store and followed her, getting close enough to overhear her phone conversation about visiting the shopping center across the street. Edwin waited until Kelsey was alone, then followed her to the adjacent parking lot. He was pleased when she parked in a secluded spot near the side entrance. He got out of his vehicle, armed with a pistol, and waited for Kelsey to return to her car. As she was getting into the driver's seat, he prevented her from closing the door. Kelsey had already pulled out the seatbelt, and Edwin allowed her to buckle up, leaving his fingerprint on it. Edwin then put the pistol barrel in Kelsey's mouth, threatening her to move to his vehicle's driver's seat. Kelsey drove Edwin's truck while he aimed the gun at her and gave her directions. When they reached a remote area at the state border, Edwin ordered Kelsey out of the truck and led her into the bushes. There, he assaulted and strangled her with the belt, then covered her body with branches. He thoroughly cleaned his truck to eliminate any evidence of Kelsey's presence, including fingerprints and DNA. He then hid the pistol, which had Kelsey's saliva on it, in his home, believing it would never be discovered. When questioned about his motive, Edwin failed to provide a clear answer, instead making a comment about the victim's physical appearance. During the investigation, several other women and girls came forward, revealing a pattern of abuse and harassment by Edwin. Further investigation uncovered more instances of Edwin's wrongdoing, including coercing a 14-year-old neighbor into intimacy, harassing a waitress, and fleeing a restaurant without paying. These findings led to additional charges, including corruption of a minor, harassment, and theft. Edwin's lawyer attempted to garner sympathy from the court by highlighting his client's troubled childhood, past victimization, and unstable upbringing. Despite these efforts, the defense was unsuccessful. Edwin's lawyer was the only person to speak in his defense and show support. Notably, Edwin's wife attended all court hearings but chose not to defend her husband, instead sitting quietly in the background. On September 16, 2008, a Johnson County judge sentenced Edwin Hall to 27 life sentences without parole. After hearing the verdict, the defendant apologized to the Kelsey family for his actions and broke down in tears. He is now serving his sentence at the Hutchinson Correctional Facility in Kansas. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kaylee Mandotti. Kaylee Mandotti was born on August 20, 1998, in Webster, Texas, to parents Tack Mandotti and Allison Steele. Her family enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle, with her mother working as a scientist and her father serving as an international executive director at MGM Resorts. Following her parents' divorce, Kaylee's mother, Allison, married NASA engineer Lawrence Buten, who resided in Houston. Although Kaylee's parents were separated, she maintained a close relationship with her father and regularly stayed in touch. Her stepfather, Lawrence, adored Kaylee and became a loving second father figure to her. Kaylee was an exceptional individual, cherished by her family and friends. She excelled as a student, team member, sister, and companion, spreading joy with her infectious laughter and kind heart. Throughout her academic career, Kaylee consistently demonstrated academic excellence and actively participated in extracurricular activities. Her diverse interests included horseback riding, piano playing, and theatrical performances. As a Girl Scout, Kaylee spent time exploring the Clear Lake neighborhood with friends and embarking on hikes with her parents. Upon graduating with honors from Clear Creek High School in League City, Texas, in 2016, Kaylee continued to pursue her passions. With a deep love for animals, Kaylee volunteered with a group called Animal Therapy. Her adventurous spirit drove her to seek out new experiences, and she aspired to try extreme sports and explore uncharted territories, always seeking thrilling experiences that brought her joy. At 19, Kaylee was a sophomore at Trinity University in San Antonio, studying communications. She was popular, with many friends, and led the cheerleading squad for the football team. Her beauty and charisma drew many admirers. During a football game, she met 22-year-old Mark Howerton, a tall, athletic professional baseball player. Initially, Kaylee didn't notice Mark, as she was interested in someone else, Jet. However, Mark was immediately smitten with Kaylee, captivated by her large black eyes and charm. Mark and Kaylee started dating in September 2017, despite their first two meetings not going well. Friends thought they were mismatched, as both were emotional and quick-tempered. Their relationship was marked by intense arguments and jealousy. Kaylee often had bruises and was afraid to retrieve her phone from Mark, a disturbing sign of the toxic relationship. The situation gets worse when Mark became aggressive, pulled out a gun, and threatened violence. Kaylee knew about her boyfriend's jealous nature and temper, but she would reassure her friends and ask them not to discuss their loud arguments publicly. However, on September 24, 2017, around 1 a.m., Kaylee's roommates had had enough and called the police due to loud noises and a man yelling and threatening violence coming from Kaylee's room. When the officer arrived, Mark was alone in the room, and Kaylee declined to press charges, downplaying the incident as just a lover's quarrel. Kaylee's friends suspected Mark of using controlled substances, which led to his angry outbursts. They recalled an incident where he threatened to throw Kaylee off a balcony and reported it to the police. Despite their tumultuous relationship, they was deeply in love during calm moments. On October 29th, they attended the Mala Luna Music Festival in San Antonio, a major event with gothic and industrial music. Mark and Kaylee were enjoying a fun time with their friends at a festival until Kaylee's ex-partner unexpectedly appeared, causing tension between Mark and Kaylee. They got into a big argument and left the festival early. Their friends didn't see them again that night. 6 hours later, Mark pulled up to a hospital in his black Mercedes, frantically seeking help. The medical staff found Kaylee unconscious and partially undressed in the front seat. The car was a mess, with her clothes scattered everywhere, and she was slumped forward, unresponsive. The hospital staff rushed Kaylee to the emergency room, where Mark revealed that they had taken illegal substances before the festival. This information helped doctors treat her for a possible overdose. Kaylee was then transferred to a specialized medical facility in Kyle, Texas, where a nurse with expertise in intimate assault cases examined her. The nurse found additional bruises on Kaylee's arms, legs, and ear. Further examination revealed that Kaylee had suffered blunt force trauma to the face and head, which ultimately led to her death. It became clear that Kaylee had been Kaylee of a fatal assault. Police launched an investigation into the death of Kaylee Mendotti, focusing on Mark as the primary suspect since he was the last person seen with her on the night of her death. During police interviews, Mark raised suspicions by repeatedly changing his story and omitting crucial details. Surveillance footage revealed that he and Kaylee had been to places that Mark had not mentioned in his account. As the investigation continued, it was discovered that Mark had a history of aggressive behavior towards Kaylee, according to her friends and family. One of her sisters even expressed fear of him. The police uncovered previous incidents of violence between they, including an instance where Mark hit Kaylee's head against a car window and vandalized her dorm room at Trinity University. When Kaylee's parents learned about Mark's history of abuse, they were devastated. Her mother, Allison Steele, filed a lawsuit against Trinity University, alleging that the school failed to protect her daughter from Mark's attacks. The lawsuit, filed in Becker County District Court, also named Mark as a defendant, claiming that he killed Kaylee in a jealous rage. The lawsuit claims that Mark Howerton assaulted 19-year-old Kaylee Mendotti, resulting in her death. It also alleges that Trinity University staff, administrators, and campus police were aware of Howerton's violent behavior and threats to harm Kaylee, including physical harm and breaking her face. Despite this knowledge, the university failed to take action to protect Kaylee in the weeks leading up to her death. A Trinity University spokesperson declined to comment on the lawsuit, citing the ongoing legal process. The lawsuit states that the university's inaction, despite numerous reports of harassment, intimidation, domestic violence, and gender discrimination, led to Kaylee's tragic death. The lawsuit argues that if Trinity University had intervened as it should have, Kaylee's death could have been prevented. The university failed to follow its own policy on investigating and responding to potential cases of relationship violence and harassment. After an incident in his dorm room, Mark was banned from campus for a year due to a criminal trespass order. Despite this, he continued to violate the order. Furthermore, detectives uncovered numerous accounts of Mark's violent behavior towards Kaylee during their relationship. One of Kaylee's sisters reported that Mark threatened to throw Kaylee off a balcony during an argument. Another sister claimed that Mark threatened to shoot some of Kaylee's ex-boyfriend's brothers with a gun. Based on these allegations, the police issued a warrant for Mark's arrest in February 2018. He turned himself in to the authorities. Following the discovery of Kaylee's disarrayed room at the university, Mark faced multiple charges, including criminal acts, intimate violence, and abduction. However, he pleaded not guilty to all charges. The first trial regarding Kaylee's death began in December 2019. Prosecutors argued that Mark, known for his volatile temperament, fatally assaulted Kaylee in a fit of rage. They claimed that he drove her around for nearly 6 hours before taking her to the hospital. In his defense, Mark's lawyers suggested that Kaylee's death could be attributed to various factors, including the presence of banned substances in her system, which may have caused a spike in blood pressure or head trauma during intimate activity. Kaylee's mother described the injuries on her daughter's body as severe, comparable to those from a plane crash. The injuries were indeed extensive, as evident from photos shown to the Bayhart County jurors. The images depict Kaylee, a sophomore at Trinity University from San Antonio, Texas, with severe bruises, red marks and scratches all over her body, from head to toe. Both her eyelids were swollen and bruised. Only her back and the back of her legs showed no signs of injury. Dr. Susanna Dana, the forensic pathologist who conducted Kaylee Mandotti's autopsy, took graphics and photographs that revealed a subdural hematoma on the right side of Kaylee's brain. This type of injury is typically associated with traumatic brain damage. Kaylee's father, Tilak Kaylee, became emotional after seeing 2 photos of his daughter in the ICU, where she lay in a vegetative state, surrounded by numerous tubes, with her face barely visible. Dr. Susanna Dana testified about the severe head and facial injuries she found on Kaylee. These injuries included a dent in her skull, eye trauma, and extensive bruising on her jaws, mouth, gums, lips, and cheeks. There were also hemorrhages in both eyes. Dr. Dana concluded that Kaylee's death was caused by head and facial trauma from a blunt object. However, Dr. William Anderson disagreed with this conclusion after reviewing the autopsy results. He pointed out that there were no fractures in the eye sockets, nose, or face, which suggested that Kaylee was not attacked from the front. Instead, Dr. Anderson believed that Kaylee's injuries were more consistent with a fall and subsequent medical treatment. Defense attorney John Hunter presented an alternative explanation, arguing that the prosecution lacked sufficient evidence to determine what happened to Kaylee Mandotti the night of the incident, making it impossible to prove Mark Howerton's involvement. During the trial, Hunter frequently highlighted Kaylee's history of drug use, including her treatment for substance dependence at a hospital. Professor Jason Wallach from the University of Sciences in Philadelphia testified that Kaylee had a high level of MDMA, ecstasy, or Molly, in her blood when her boyfriend took her to the hospital on October 29, 2017. The presence of this substance can turn a minor head injury fatal. Hunter stated that MDMA affects people differently, causing increased body temperature or electrolyte imbalances that can lead to loss of consciousness. Mark Howerton told investigators that he and Kaylee had an argument and engaged in consensual rough intimacy before she lost consciousness, but the origin and timing of her bruises remained unexplained. In December 2019, Allison believed Mark Howerton would be found responsible for her daughter's death. However, the trial ended in a mistrial due to the jury's inability to reach a verdict. Mark's defense claimed Kaylee's injuries were caused by hospital staff, leading to the hung jury in the 144th District Court, presided over by Judge Raymond Angeline. Because the jury was unable to reach a verdict, the case was dismissed, and Mark was acquitted of the charges in the first trial, leaving the case unresolved. District Attorney Joe Gonzalez, who had been handling the case from the beginning, expressed disappointment with the outcome and stated that he would review the case again. During this time, Kaylee's parents, Allison and Lawrence, began their own investigation. They gathered evidence and autopsy reports from the police and focused on a small, round bruise near their daughter's ear. They speculated that Mark might have hit her head against the car window, causing her to hit the door lock and get bruised. They hoped this new information would establish Mark's guilt. Lawrence found a similar Mercedes to Mark's and recreated the incident with photos. With the Texas Rangers' help, Lawrence got records and affidavits for an arrest warrant for assault and mischief. The records provided a detailed timeline of events leading up to Kaylee's death and evidence found during the investigation. The authorities exposed Mark Howerton's alleged deception to the Rangers and revealed the evidence that resulted in his arrest. Prosecutors described Howerton as a controlling boyfriend who constantly called Kaylee Mandotti, took away her phone, and isolated her from friends. 2 weeks before Kaylee's death, Howerton physically assaulted her, pushing her against a brick wall and trashing her dorm room. After the incident, Kaylee asked for space, but Howerton responded with dozens of messages, including a threat to end his life. Kaylee pleaded with him not to harm himself. That evening, Howerton called Kaylee around 200 times. Later, they attended a festival where they argued over Kaylee's ex-boyfriend. Mark Howerton took Kaylee from the festival, drove her to a deserted parking lot near the Whataburger headquarters, and spent over an hour there, according to GPS camera records. Prosecutors believe that it was in this parking lot where Mark Howerton attacked and killed Kaylee Mandotti. Kaylee Mandotti's family expressed gratitude to the Texas Rangers for their diligent efforts in securing suitable criminal charges against Kaylee's alleged attacker. Mark Howerton's pre-trial began in June 2023. During the trial, the prosecution initially considered presenting a video recorded by Kaylee's parents in the hospital that showed her injuries, but ultimately decided not to use it. The prosecution took into account evidence gathered with the assistance of the Texas Rangers, despite potential complications and new disputes. Mark Howerton was found guilty of aggravated assault resulting in bodily harm that led to a lethal outcome. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, a fine of $110,000, and ordered to pay restitution to Kaylee Mandotti's family. Furthermore, he was prohibited from contacting over 20 individuals connected to the case. Now over 30 years old, Mark is serving his sentence in the Wilkes County Jail and will be eligible for parole in 2033. The conviction brought some closure to Kaylee's family, but felt the sentence was not enough for their loss. In the second trial, Mark Howerton faced additional charges, including aggravated assault and criminally negligent homicide, on top of the initial manslaughter charge. The prosecution changed its strategy to build a stronger case against him. However, Kaylee's family and prosecutors were unhappy with the outcome and pushed for a retrial. Kaylee Mandotti's tragic story shows the devastating effects of violence on a young life and her family's struggle for justice. Kaylee's story is a powerful reminder of the consequences of violence against young people with promising futures. Despite the conviction, her family believes the verdict does not bring justice for their daughter. In 2021, Allison filed a civil lawsuit against Trinity University, alleging negligence in protecting her daughter. She claimed the university failed to inform Kaylee's guardians about Mark Howerton's destructive behavior in her dorm room and took no action against him, allowing him continued access to her daughter. It is unclear whether evidence collected by Allison and Lawrence was presented during Mark Howerton's trial. However, in 2023, he was found guilty of aggravated assault causing bodily harm, despite being acquitted of the more serious charge. Prosecutors noted that Kaylee's family was satisfied with the verdict, as it brought an end to the prolonged legal proceedings. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jesse Bardwell. Jesse Bardwell was born on September 10, 1988, in Pascagoula, Mississippi, to loving parents Gary and Carla Bardwell. She had an older brother named Brandon. The siblings had a close relationship, with Brandon often protecting Jesse from bullies. Their childhood was filled with joy and love, thanks in part to frequent visits from their grandma Kitty, who adored her grandchildren. She would read to them, share stories, and invent games, creating a warm and nurturing environment. The Bardwell family embodied the quintessential American family spirit. Jessie was a kind, cheerful, and stylish girl who dreamed of a career in the beauty industry and one day opening her own salon. However, when Jessie was 14, her parents divorced, disrupting the family's harmony. She chose to live with her father, Gary, with whom she had a warm and trusting relationship. As a firefighter, Gary's job could be unpredictable, and Jessie would often call to check on him. Gary eventually married again, this time to Gina. Jessie developed a good relationship with her new stepmother. Gina proved to be an excellent homemaker, providing care and support to the entire family. Jessie was relieved to see her father happy with his partner, which made her feel secure about leaving home in the future. After completing her education, Jessie moved to Orange Beach, Alabama, to start her independent life. She worked as a waitress at Cobalt, a popular beachfront restaurant, to support herself. Her father, Gary, recalled how Jessie loved being near the water as it brought her peace. Despite the distance, they remained close, frequently exchanging messages and spending quality time together, such as going boating and fishing, whenever he visited. Kimberly Ebry, the restaurant manager and Jessie's friend, discovered that Jessie's father was a skilled musician. After retiring, he dedicated more time to his craft, leading to frequent performances at the restaurant, where he even had his own table. Kimberly admired the close bond between Jessie and her father, describing them as true friends. Jessie always attended her father's performances, and the tips she earned helped fund her college education and pursue her dreams. At work, Jessie met a young man named Terry Ellis, who was also a waiter. They began dating and developed a steady and serious relationship, appearing to be a harmonious couple. However, at a social event, Jessie met Jason Lowe, a friend of Terry's, and was immediately smitten. Her sudden infatuation surprised everyone, and she fell deeply in love with Jason, becoming oblivious to her surroundings. Jessie and Terry parted ways amicably. Jessie opened up to him about her newfound feelings. This decision turned her life upside down, but she was drawn to Jason's charming and promising nature. He was handsome, held 2 degrees, and had a decent job. Jason was polite and knew how to present himself well. For Jessie, her new feelings marked the beginning of a new life. When Jason learned about her dreams, he promised to fulfill them. As he needed to relocate to Dallas, Texas, for a high-paying job in the technology industry, Jessie decided to follow him. Jessie viewed the move as an adventure, rather than a life-changing decision. Although she was hesitant to leave her father, Gary, for an extended period, her ambition and youthful idealism ultimately prevailed. She kept her plans a secret from her father, fearing his disappointment and knowing he would be opposed to her decision. As a result, she didn't inform him of her plans, even when they spent their last Christmas together. Mr. Bardwell didn't notice anything out of the ordinary about his daughter Jessie's behavior initially. She seemed happy, laughing and joking as usual. Jessie, 24, had moved to Richardson, a suburb of Dallas, with her boyfriend Jason. While Jason worked from home, Jessie was looking for a new job and scouting locations for her own salon. They had plans to get married and buy a house. However, Jessie's relationship with her father began to change drastically. They grew apart, and Jessie stopped answering her father's calls, which troubled Mr. Bardwell. It wasn't until speaking with Kimberly that Mr. Bardwell learned of Jessie's new boyfriend and her move out of state. He tried to reconnect with Jessie, but Jason controlled her communications. Mr. Bardwell's suspicions about Jason grew after meeting him when they visited Pascagoula. The father attempted to dissuade his daughter, Jessie, from returning to Texas, but she was resolute. When Gary inquired about her well-being, Jessie hugged him tightly, insisting everything was fine and expressing her desire to make her family proud. However, her father couldn't shake off the feeling that something was amiss. He even wrote a song, "Taken," in her honor. For months after Jessie moved to Texas, she ceased responding to phone calls. The final warning sign came on May 8, when she failed to wish her mother and stepmother a happy Mother's Day, a cherished family tradition. Gary sensed something was terribly wrong and contacted Jason, Jessie's boyfriend. Jason claimed ignorance of Jessie's whereabouts, citing their supposedly open relationship, which allowed her to come and go as she pleased. However, Gary knew this was a lie, aware that Jason was a jealous and controlling partner who contradicted himself. The next morning, Jessie's father headed to Texas, convinced that her boyfriend was involved in her disappearance. During his journey, he sent the boyfriend a message warning him that if Jessie wasn't home when he arrived, there would be serious consequences. When he arrived at their apartment, he found no sign of Jessie or her belongings. Despite this, the boyfriend claimed he had no idea where she was and was waiting for her to return. Later, Kimberly shared some information that Jesse had confided in her during a rare heart-to-heart conversation. It turned out that Jason had been spending money on banned substances and entertainment, and his promises to fulfill Jesse's dreams had largely evaporated. The boyfriend had been pretending to be someone he wasn't, and this was also reflected in how he treated Jesse. While their relationship appeared fine in public, Jason was often rude and aggressive in private, leading to frequent conflicts. With Jesse missing, her father filed a missing person report with the Richardson police. The investigation was led by Detective Hiram Hale, a father of 3 daughters who was determined to uncover the truth. The police took immediate action, speaking with the boyfriend several times and searching the house, but they found no sign of Jesse. During the conversation, the young man, Jason, mentioned that he last saw Jesse on May 8 around 10 a.m. She left without explanation, and he thought she might be visiting her parents. He claimed that she drove away in her Acura car. Jason maintained that their relationship was casual and that he didn't control her or pry into her personal life. However, investigators discovered information that contradicted his statements. They found out that Jesse had sold her Acura car 3 weeks earlier, and Jason was present at the sale. This new information raised suspicions, and investigators questioned Jason again on May 12. When searching his home, police found a plate with a powder substance in the kitchen, which turned out to be cocaine. The investigation then shifted to Jason's garage and the vehicle inside. At first, Jason was unwilling to permit the search, stating that he shared the garage with others and therefore required their consent. However, he eventually dropped his objections. Upon entering the garage, officers noticed a mud-splattered Audi with a detached bumper. They suspected that Jesse's body might be inside the car. Although the vehicle was empty, the smell of decomposition was stronger inside. Police found the broken bumper and what appeared to be blood stains in the trunk. When experts applied a luminol-based substance to the cargo area, it illuminated with a blue light, indicating the presence of blood, likely belonging to the missing woman. Jason claimed he became stuck in the mud while searching for his girlfriend after the car's bumper caught on a bush. Despite this, he maintained that he had no knowledge of her whereabouts. However, he was unable to explain the presence of blood in the car or the controlled substances found in his home. Experts determined that the amount of blood in the trunk suggested that she was likely deceased. As a result, the case was reclassified as a homicide investigation. To prevent the main suspect from fleeing, Jason was detained on charges related to the narcotics found in his home. During interrogation, Jason continued to stick to his story. When shown a photo of his loved one, he refused to provide any explanations, gazing at the picture without emotion and suggesting that he was being framed for a crime he did not commit. Eventually, the suspect was charged with homicide, even though Jesse's body had not been found. The search for her continued, but it was a difficult and time-consuming process in the vast state of Texas, with its many rivers, lakes, fields, and forests, where a body could easily be hidden. 1 year later, Jason was in a Texas jail, still cooperating with the investigation. He revealed 2 key details about the case. Firstly, he claimed Jesse's death was an accident and planned to reveal more in court, hoping the jury would be understanding. This makes it difficult for prosecutors to build a case. Andy Farkas, Jason's defense attorney, is very happy about this. Farkas conducted a mock trial with a panel of outsiders acting as jurors, using the available evidence and Jason's confession. However, the mock trial ended in a not guilty verdict, with 15 out of the mock jurors voting to acquit. Farkas hoped that a real court would also deliver a not guilty verdict if they knew the truth. It was later revealed that Jason himself had provided the anonymous tip about the location of the victim's body, which became another piece of evidence in the investigation. The prosecution proposed a deal to reduce the sentence by half if Jason revealed Jesse's location. After discussing it with his lawyer, Jason agreed, on the condition that the source of the information would remain secret until the trial. The authorities wanted to find Jessie's body so her family could give her a proper burial and say their goodbyes. As time passed, Jessie's father, Gary, became consumed by grief and anger, longing for justice to be served. On May 19th, when Jessie's body was finally discovered, her loved ones were able to mourn her and say goodbye. However, when Gary received the autopsy report, he was shocked and appalled by the state of his daughter's body. She had been wrapped in a sheet and was barely recognizable as a human being, having been discarded like trash. Gary arranged for his daughter's body to be returned to her hometown with the help of his friends and former colleagues, who hired a funeral hearse to transport her. Jessie's family, friends, and acquaintances held a memorial service for her on the beach, where they prayed for her to be found and for justice for her suffering. About 1,000 people attended a memorial service at the First United Methodist Church to honor the victim. The victim's grandmother, Kitty Bardwell, spoke emotionally, saying that if the town could be cleansed by the tears shed for her granddaughter, it would be truly clean. The tragedy drew widespread attention, with many offering condolences to the family and coming forward to support them. Gary found a unique way to cope with his emotions. Gary printed a photo of Jason, attached it to a stump, and hit it with a 12-pound sledgehammer. This unusual form of therapy brought him some small sense of relief. However, Gary continued to struggle, often finding it hard to get out of bed in the morning. He held on to the hope that Jason would be tried and convicted for murdering his daughter. Gary blamed himself for not doing more to protect Jessie, wishing he had convinced her to leave Jason or at least break up with him. Gary remembered a phone call from Jessie, where she admitted he was right about Jason after they had argued and he had kicked her out. She had found temporary shelter with a friend but returned to Jason the next day, giving him another chance. Gary had no choice but to accept his daughter's decision, a choice that would later fill him with regret. When the trial finally began, Gary traveled to Texas, determined to see Jason punished for his crime. Prosecutor Cynthia Walker started her opening statement by describing Jason's personality. Many people saw him as complex and difficult to get along with, and he had few friends because of his long history of substance abuse, which often led to uncontrollable outbursts of anger. It's possible that Jessie was a victim of one of these outbursts. Prosecutor Westwin called some of Jason's former girlfriends to testify. They supported the prosecution's claims about Jason's aggressive behavior, saying they had feared for their lives because of his violent jealousy. Like Jessie, they had been isolated from their friends and family by Jason, who showed clear signs of being manipulative and a pathological liar. In contrast, Jason presented himself as superior to other men, successfully deceiving people. Jason responded quickly to these revelations in court. He said he had started using substances at age 13, influenced by his friends, and had become addicted. Jason Lowe tried to keep his life on track, earning multiple degrees and working for a prestigious global company. He claimed his actions were motivated by a desire to fulfill Jessie's dreams and build a life together out of love. However, the prosecution presented a different image of Jason. They suggested that his behavior was inconsistent with someone grieving the loss of a loved one. The investigation found that Jessie's death occurred between May 1st and May 3rd, likely on the day of a reported argument with Jason that the neighbors, the Jordans, witnessed. After Jessie's death, Jason moved her body to the garage and placed it in the trunk of his car, where it remained for several days. The blood found in the car was confirmed to be Jessie's. Jason later moved her body to a remote farm, hiding it in the nearby woods. The sheet wrapping Jessie's body was identified as part of Jason's bedding set, which was still in use at his home even after her death. Meanwhile, Jason continued to see other women, exchanging messages and intimate photos with them before meeting at his apartment. Jason tried to cope with his emotions by using substances, which he believed made dealing with reality easier. However, His attempt to distract himself was disrupted when detectives discovered his involvement in Jesse's death through a clever tactic. They asked Tommy Jordan, someone Jason knew, to talk to him while being monitored. During this conversation, Jason admitted to making a mistake and feeling guilty about an accident that happened with Jesse, which he attributed to his own negligence. Jason's admission was seen as a confession, and he eventually told the prosecution where Jesse's body was located. At the trial, Jason shared his account of what happened on the night of Jesse's death. He explained that they had taken pills that increased their libido and were intimate in the shower. Jason slipped and fell, followed by Jessie, who hit her head on the bathtub. She then sat down, feeling hot and dizzy, and Jason claimed he offered to call for medical help, but Jessie refused, thinking that rest and sleep would be enough. Jason found Jessie unresponsive and not breathing on his chest the next morning. Despite trying to revive her, she was dead. Afraid of being accused of murder, Jason didn't call the police and instead decided to handle the situation himself. He initially left Jessie's body in his car, but later moved it to a remote farm where he carelessly discarded her in a trash pile without a proper burial. However, Jason's story was questionable due to his questionable character and the results of the forensic medical examination. The examination revealed that Jessie had suffered severe head injuries that couldn't have been caused by slaps to the face, suggesting that Jason had tried to cover up evidence of a violent beating. As a result, Jason's entire story was discredited. After deliberating for 6 hours, the jury found him guilty. Judge Scott Becker sentenced Jason to 50 years in prison. Jason's original sentence could have been up to 99 years, but it was reduced due to a deal with the prosecution. As a result, Jason won't be eligible for parole until at least 2041. Gary felt a sense of relief when the verdict was announced, feeling that justice had been served. However, he noticed that Jason showed no remorse for his actions. Interestingly, Jason's ex-girlfriends, including Chrissy Chambers, were present at the trial, with Chambers commenting that if she could give one piece of advice to others in similar situations, it would be to get away as soon as possible. Jason continues to claim that the death was an accident and maintains his innocence to this day. Sadly, Jason's girlfriend, Jessie, had already paid the ultimate price. Jessie grew up with a positive example of male behavior, courtesy of her father Gary, but tragically discovered Jason's darker side too late. This experience serves as a warning that some men can be deceiving, manipulative, hiding behind a charming exterior. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lindsay Birbeck. Lindsay was born in Blackburn, Lancashire, northwest England. She and her husband, Tim Birbeck, separated in July 2018, but they continued living together until March 2019. At that time, Lindsay moved to a new home on Burnley Road in Hanko. As a mother, Lindsay cared for her 2 adult children, Divin, 20, and Sarah, 17. Professionally, she worked as a teacher's aide at Atton Hill Elementary School in Burnley. She enjoyed being around children and was known for her artistic talent. Lindsay would often go the extra mile to create impressive props for school productions. On August 12, Lindsay went for a walk in the wooded area of Coppice, near her Hanko home. However, when her daughter Sarah and Sarah's boyfriend Brandon arrived at the house for a scheduled tea party, Lindsay was nowhere to be found. This was unusual, as Lindsay was not one to forget appointments. Sarah tried calling Lindsay multiple times, but there was no answer. She sent Lindsay a text message saying, "Where are you? We sat outside for an hour and called 6 times." When Lindsay didn't respond, Sarah sent another message with a series of question marks, but still received no reply. After waiting for an hour outside Lindsay's house, Sarah called her father, Tim Birbeck, since her mother was not home and not answering her phone. Tim took Sarah and her brother Brandon to his house around midnight. Later, Sarah and Tim went back to Lindsay's house with a spare set of keys, but Lindsay was nowhere to be found. The house looked undisturbed, and there were no signs of anything out of the ordinary or a note explaining Lindsay's whereabouts. At 12:11 a.m. on August 13th, Tim contacted the police to report Lindsay missing, stating, "Lindsay seems to be missing. We can't find her." Lindsay's disappearance shocked the community, prompting a massive search effort. Hundreds of people, including families with strollers and teenagers, joined the search, even if they didn't know Lindsay personally. After days of searching, posting on social media, and putting up posters, the community gathered at a local spot called Coppice for 2 days, hoping to find a clue to help solve the mystery of Lindsay's disappearance. The search continued non-stop despite the challenges. Thousands of posters with Lindsay's picture were distributed throughout the neighborhood. A Facebook group to aid the search gained 10,000 members. Posters soon appeared everywhere, including lamp posts, storefronts, and traffic lights, asking for help in finding Lindsay. Police launched a thorough investigation into Lindsay's disappearance, conducting extensive searches around her house and the surrounding countryside. A team of specialists, including police officers, dog handlers, firefighters, and mountain rescue volunteers, scoured the area. They also deployed drones and helicopters to cover a wide range, including popular walking and running routes. For days after Lindsay went missing, police released CCTV footage showing her last seen walking along Burnley Road towards Coppice at 4:10 p.m. She was wearing a distinctive purple jacket, black leggings, and dark sneakers with white soles. As a week passed since her disappearance, hopes of finding Lindsay alive began to dwindle. Despite the efforts of the police, her whereabouts remained a mystery. However, the police emphasized that there was no evidence to suggest she was the victim of a crime, leaving a glimmer of hope that she might still be found alive. That evening, hundreds of local residents joined forces for the first mass public search of Coppice, following a rallying call on social media. A local resident's dog ran into the woods at Errington Cemetery, prompting its owner to follow. The dog didn't respond to its owner's calls, instead hiding its head in the bushes and sniffing at something. As the owner approached, they felt something soft underfoot, which frightened them. A terrible smell and swarming flies surrounded a plastic bag, with what appeared to be a foot visible. On August 24th, Lindsay Bobek's body was discovered 12 days after her disappearance. Her naked body was buried in the cemetery, wrapped in 2 clear plastic bags and mixed with earth and grass, in a shallow grave. With this discovery, the search for Lindsay Bobek was concluded, and a murder investigation officially began. Pathologist Dr. Naomi Carter conducted an autopsy and found that the cause of death was a broken neck, likely caused by a forceful blow from a foot or knee. The trauma was so severe that the entire larynx was crushed. Additionally, it appeared that someone had attempted to cut off the right leg after death, possibly using a saw, leaving a large laceration that cut down to the bone. Due to the poor condition of the body, Dr. Carter had difficulty determining the full extent of the injuries. While she couldn't rule out the possibility of sexual activity on the day of the disappearance, the level of decomposition made it impossible to confirm. Before the body was found, the area had been searched by police and community volunteers for several days, but nothing was discovered. A blue wheelie garbage can was spotted in nearby bushes, but its significance was not yet realized at that stage of the investigation. Volunteers searched the cemetery on August 20th at 9 p.m. and found a dumpster with a dark stain that they suspected might be blood. They took pictures and called the police, who arrived to inspect the dumpster. However, the police officers thought the dark stain was just dirt and noted that the dumpster looked new. With no evidence linking it to Lindsay's disappearance, they left it in place. Other clues were found in the cemetery but weren't immediately considered significant. Christine Alderson, a local resident, discovered a bloody cloth on the grass on August 18 while walking her dogs. She believed the blood was fresh but thought it might belong to a homeless man who often visited the area. Judith Bibby, another dog walker, reported seeing what was likely Lindsay's jacket hanging on a barbed wire fence near the Cardiel Hill Trail. On August 25, investigators returned to the crime scene and discovered a yellow-handled saw and a pair of green heavy-duty gloves near Lindsay's grave. The gloves had blood on them and were sent for forensic testing. The test results showed that the gloves contained the perpetrator's DNA on the inside and Lindsay's DNA on the outside of the left glove. Additionally, investigators found a pair of Lindsay's Skechers sneakers in a blue plastic bag in the cemetery. The shoes had been cut along the sole. Further examination revealed that Lindsay's body was wrapped in plastic sheeting, with foliage and grass that didn't match the cemetery grounds between her body and the sheeting. This led investigators to believe that Lindsay's body had been moved from another location. The discovery of the moved body led detectives to recall a blue trash can that had caught the attention of volunteers. Upon reviewing CCTV footage, police officers made a surprising discovery that left the investigation team perplexed. Several images showed a young man pulling a blue wheelie garbage can in the Burley Road area over the course of a few days. A CCTV camera caught the same individual returning to the cemetery on 4 separate occasions. This footage helped identify a suspect. A video of the young man carrying a trash can down the street, possibly containing Lindsay's body, gained widespread attention. The video was broadcast on the news with a request for help identifying the individual, which proved successful. The individual in the video was identified as Rocky Marciano Rocky, a local resident who lived with his parents and 5 siblings on Winnie Hill Road in Arrington. The Rocky family had resided in this home for approximately 3 decades. Rocky struggled with a range of mental health issues, including autism, attention deficit disorder, and hyperactivity, which he had experienced since childhood. Additionally, his low IQ presented challenges with learning and communication. Rocky attended an alternative school in Barnoldswick several days a week, where teachers described him as a quiet and nonverbal student. In 2015, a psychologist evaluated Rocky and found he had difficulty understanding his emotions and how they related to events. A 2016 report noted that Rocky was unresponsive to strangers and required constant supervision. According to Timothy Bradley, a teacher at his school, Rocky showed little interest in academics, preferring practical activities. He rarely engaged in conversations, even about topics that interested him. Rocky was physically strong and enjoyed activities like going to the gym, caring for chickens, and playing Xbox. Rocky often seemed detached from reality and unaware of his actions. His attack on Lindsay Bubeck appeared to be motivated by a desire to kill a woman, and she happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The murder was a random act committed by a stranger. On August 12, 2020, 1 year after the crime, Rocky Marciano Rocky went on trial. After an 8-day retrial and 4 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered a unanimous guilty verdict. Rocky, 17, showed no reaction via video link from Her Majesty's Prison, Wetherby. His parents, present in court, also remained expressionless. Rocky had pleaded guilty to aiding in the disposal of Lindsay's body but denied any role in her death. He claimed a male stranger approached him and offered a fee to help bury she. In a prepared statement, Rocky admitted to moving the garbage can and burying the body, but maintained he had no involvement in Lindsay's death. However, evidence collected from his home in Arrington, including identical plastic bags found at Lindsay's grave and a tracksuit matching the one he wore in surveillance footage from August 12, 16, and 17, contradicted his claims. Defense attorney Mark Van Hull stated to the jurors that although Rocky committed a reprehensible act by burying her body in the cemetery, he maintains that Rocky was not responsible for her death despite the substantial evidence against him. The judge sentenced Rocky to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years. He will be eligible for release only when the parole board determines he is no longer a danger to society. The judge described the attack as swift and brutal, and stated that Rocky clearly intended to kill a woman who was walking in the area just minutes before Lindsay's murder. Security footage shows that Rocky Price made 2 return visits to the location where Lindsay was killed on the evening of August 12. At 6:55 p.m., he was captured on CCTV carrying a black backpack, likely containing a saw to dismember the victim's body. At 8:28 p.m., he was seen at the same location, where he would eventually dispose of the body. With no visible signs of panic or distress, Rocky Price carried out a calculated plan to dispose of Lindsay's body. He carefully placed it in a blue trash can, wrapping it in 2 plastic bags, before burying it in a shallow grave at Arrington Cemetery. The fact that he stalked another woman before killing Lindsay Bebek indicates that his crime was premeditated, rather than a spontaneous loss of control. Lindsay's funeral took place at St. Margaret's Church in Hapton on September 20th. Over 200 people attended the service, which was briefly interrupted by police stopping traffic on Manchester Road to allow Lindsay's coffin, adorned with flowers, to be carried into the church. The scene was filled with dozens of bouquets from friends, family, and strangers who were moved by Lindsay's story. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Natalee Holloway. Natalee Holloway was born on October 21, 1986, in Clinton, Mississippi, to Elizabeth and David Edward Holloway. Her parents had a loving relationship that began in their youth, but after 13 years of marriage, they divorced due to the stresses of domestic life. Following the divorce, Natalee and her brother Matthew lived with their mother, who continued to receive emotional and financial support from their father. In 2000, Elizabeth remarried to George Twitty, a businessman from Alabama, and the family moved to Mountain Brook. The transition was seamless, and Natalee and her brother remained close to their father, visiting him regularly during holidays. Natalee's upbringing was deeply influenced by her family's strong Christian values, which emphasized kindness, modesty, and community involvement. As a result, she developed into a compassionate and humble individual who prioritized her studies and extracurricular activities over social events. Despite her popularity, Natalee chose not to attend parties or go on dates, instead focusing on her goals and aspirations. She was an excellent student, a skilled dancer, and an active member of various clubs, with ambitions to pursue a career in medicine and secure a scholarship to a local university. On May 26, 2005, Natalee joined 123 other students and 7 chaperones on a trip to a beautiful Aruba island. The group of 18-year-olds stayed at the Holiday Inn and spent their time relaxing on the beach, swimming, and enjoying the local restaurants and entertainment. They made the most of their trip, dancing into the early hours of the morning. On the night of May 29th to 30th, Natalee was initially acting normally in socializing while sober. However, after consuming a drink given to her by Joran, her behavior changed, indicating that she may have been under the influence of a substance. The staff at Carlos and Charlie's bar had a positive opinion of Natalee, but viewed Joran unfavorably due to his history of poor behavior, gambling, and substance abuse. Joran had a reputation for renting hotel rooms with friends, where they would invite foreign women and secretly record their activities, later uploading the videos online. Natalee Holloway's disappearance began with a frantic phone call from her mother, Elizabeth Twitty. After failing to reach her daughter, Elizabeth contacted one of the trip's chaperones to report her concerns. Elizabeth's instincts told her something was wrong, as Natalee was a responsible and punctual person who always stayed in touch. When Natalee didn't return to the airport with the rest of the group on May 30th, Elizabeth's worst fears were confirmed. Her belongings, including her phone and passport, were still at the hotel, but Natalee was nowhere to be found. Elizabeth and her husband quickly flew to Aruba to search for their missing daughter. When Elizabeth arrived in Aruba, she discovered more about Natalie's disappearance than the police had. Unfortunately, the authorities didn't seem to be in a hurry to investigate and initially disregarded Elizabeth's concerns. This type of case isn't unusual in Aruba, and the police appeared to be taking it lightly. They implied that it was common for tourists to miss their flights or lose track of their group, and that Natalie was probably just having fun, drinking, or socializing with new people. Natalie's last known whereabouts were on May 30th at around 1:30 a.m., when she left a bar with a man named Van der Sloot. They got into a car with two other young men, and that's the last time she was seen. Natalie and her friends had been spending time at the notorious Carlos and Charlie's nightclub and casino. On one of those nights, she met a 17-year-old local named Joran, who offered to buy her a drink. He then invited her to visit a lighthouse and see sharks in the area. As they left the club, a silver Honda car driven by the Deepak Kalpoe brothers was waiting for them. Elizabeth contacted the police for a second time 4 hours later, and this time she shared some concerning information. As a result, the three individuals were detained. Van der Sloot initially claimed he didn't know Natalie, but eventually admitted he had left the bar with her. According to him, they spent some time driving around, stopped by the beach, and later dropped Natalie off near her hotel. Deepak Kalpoe brothers, 18, and the 21-year-old, confirmed Van der Sloot's story. It's worth noting that the three were questioned together by the police, an approach that seems questionable from a law enforcement perspective. Later on, they altered their statements multiple times. Despite his questionable behavior, Joran was never held accountable for his actions. None of the charges against him went to court. It was later discovered that Joran's father, Paulus van der Sloot, was a well-known lawyer who was seeking a judgeship. Apparently, corruption was prevalent in Aruba, allowing individuals like Joran to avoid accountability for their actions. As the investigation continued, David Holloway, Natalie's father, arrived in Aruba and joined the search efforts, which were led by his ex-wife and journalists. As public pressure mounted, it was discovered that the hotel's surveillance cameras did not capture the suspect's car, and there was no footage of Natalie entering the building on May 30th. This revelation contradicted the statements of Joran and the Kalpoe brothers, who were subsequently called in for questioning again. During this second round of questioning, one of the Kalpoe brothers unexpectedly changed his story, claiming that he had dropped Natalie off at a location before reaching the hotel, which was not covered by surveillance cameras. He also added that he had seen a figure in black approaching Natalie, who was later revealed to be one of the hotel's security guards. On June 5th, investigators took into custody the hotel security staff who were working the night Natalie disappeared. 4 days later, on June 9th, detectives arrested 3 people, including 2 of the Kalpoe brothers, due to suspicious circumstances. While in jail, one of the security guards learned something important from the Kalpoe brothers. Satish admitted that he and his brother Deepak had lied to protect their friend Joran. In reality, they had left Joran alone with Natalie on the beach and had gone their separate ways. The security guards were released on June 13th. A few days later, on June 17th, police detained Steve Gregory Cruz, a DJ who had worked on yacht parties, because they suspected he might be involved in Natalie's disappearance. On June 22nd, Paulus van der Sloot, Joran's father, was questioned and detained by police, but he was released on June 26th along with Steve Cruz because there was not enough evidence. Joran later changed his story again, this time blaming the Kalpoe brothers for Natalie's disappearance. He claimed that he had said goodbye to Natalie near his home and that she had left with the brothers. However, his new story was not believable. The Kalpoe brothers' lawyer responded to Joran's accusations. After a short trial on July 4th, the Kalpoe brothers were released from custody. At the same time, Joran's time in custody was extended by 2 more months. Despite the growing evidence, the police seemed to be ignoring Joran's possible involvement in Natalie's disappearance. Joran van der Sloot was born on August 6, 1987, in Arnhem, Netherlands, to Paulus van der Sloot, a lawyer, and Anita van der Sloot-Hugen, an art teacher. He was one of 3 brothers in a large family that moved to Aruba in 1990. Joran grew up on the island, where he attended the International School of Aruba and excelled academically. He also developed a passion for sports, particularly soccer and tennis, and showed promise in these areas. Joran's family life was complicated. As a child, he was closer to his father, but his relationship with his mother was strained. Anita considered Joran dishonest and struggled to instill good values in him. She remembered him as a rebellious child who frequently ran away from home. As Joran entered adulthood, he began to associate with a questionable crowd and developed a taste for gambling. Despite this, he presented himself as confident and fearless to his friends, which initially impressed many people. However, locals were wary of Joran, sensing that his permissive behavior would eventually lead to trouble. Joran was popular with girls, but he often took advantage of them. Overall, people had mixed opinions about Joran, with some being drawn to his charismatic personality and others being put off by his questionable behavior. As the investigation into the suspects continued, the search for Natalie Holloway remained ongoing. U.S. authorities assisted by closely monitoring the progress and providing significant financial support to aid in the search for the Natalie. Although the Aruban authorities were not pleased with the increased scrutiny, they accepted the funding. On August 26, the police detained the Calpo brothers and another young man, but this was unrelated to the case. The arrest was an attempt to intimidate them into talking. All 4 were released on bail on September 3, 2005, and a week and a half later, all restrictions were lifted. Joran van der Sloot spent about 3 months in custody. After his release, he reveled in the notoriety, giving interviews and appearing on TV shows. He claimed Natalie Holloway was flirtatious and offered intimacy, but he declined due to lack of contraception. When questioned about his credibility, Joran threw a glass at the interviewer, showcasing his impulsiveness and aggression. According to the recorder, Joran van der Sloot was confessing to witnessing Natalie Holloway's death on the beach in Aruba. He claimed they were intimate before she lost consciousness, and despite trying CPR, she died. Van der Sloot said he and a friend disposed of her body at sea. Despite the damning recording, Van der Sloot again avoided consequences, quickly denying his statement after it aired. In his 2007 book, The Case of Natalie Holloway, My Own Account, Van der Sloot maintained his innocence, apologizing to Natalie's family and providing his account of events, despite ceasing search efforts by authorities. In 2008, 2 new witnesses came forward in the case. One reported seeing Joran and his father on the beach near the Holiday Inn on May 30, 2005, around 4 a.m. Joran appeared disheveled and shirtless. The witness saw them arguing in a car before driving away. However, Paulus had an alibi for the night of Natalie's disappearance. Joran's former girlfriend also came forward, recalling a comment he made about easily disposing of a body. However, Joran was known for lying and exaggerating. Despite these developments, Joran and the Calpo brothers were detained and released multiple times. The Holloway family hired a private investigator, Tim Miller, who searched the landfill and discovered oversights by the island's police, including failure to interview Natalie's classmates or hotel room neighbors. Natalie's electronic room key was used several times on the night of her disappearance, and she left behind her rare and expensive mobile phone. A male DNA was found on her toothbrush. The investigation's flaws were exposed. After his father's death, Joran contacted the Holloway family, offering to reveal the truth about Natalie's disappearance for a $250,000 reward. He claimed he wanted to clear his conscience, but was actually blackmailing them. The Holloways, desperate for answers, paid Joran $25,000 to meet with their lawyer, John Kelly, in Aruba. Joran provided a new account of events, claiming Natalie resisted his sexual assault, struggled, and hit her head on a rock after he pushed her. He then buried her body in a building foundation. Elizabeth Twitty followed up on Joran's claims by contacting the police. However, verifying his story was simple, and it quickly became apparent that the house he pointed to had been built long before Natalie's disappearance. As a result, the police concluded that his testimony was insufficient to warrant an arrest. It was widely believed that Joran had fabricated another lie to obtain money, and after receiving the funds, he fled to Peru. In another case, on June 1, 2010, the body of 21-year-old Stephanie Tatiana Flores Ramirez was found in a hotel room in Lima, Peru. She had suffered severe injuries and died from a neck fracture. The case drew significant media attention due to the victim's father being a well-known businessman and former Formula One driver. Surveillance footage quickly identified the perpetrator. Surprisingly, the perpetrator was Joran van der Sloot. He was arrested and taken into custody. He claimed to have met Stephanie at the Atlantic City Casino on May 30th, where they played poker together. They then decided to continue their time in his hotel room, where they gambled at an online casino. Stephanie discovered disturbing information on Joran's laptop while he was in the bathroom. She learned that he was a suspect in the disappearance of Natalie Holloway, which frightened her and made her want to leave. However, Joran caught her and became enraged when he realized what she had found. He physically attacked her until he was certain she was dead. After the attack, Joran showered and left the scene, instructing the staff not to disturb Stephanie, falsely claiming she was sleeping. Her body was found 3 days later, on June 3rd. Joran was caught on June 4th while trying to flee to Chile and subsequently confessed to the crime. The news of the murder shocked the U.S., especially given that it occurred exactly 5 years after Natalie Holloway's disappearance. Elizabeth Twitty, Natalie's mother, was moved by the news, saying that justice had finally been served, but at a terrible cost. On January 11, 2012, Joran van der Sloot was sentenced to 28 years in prison for Stephanie's murder and ordered to pay the Ramirez family $75,000 in compensation. Joran was first imprisoned at Pedras Gordas, but was later moved to Chalip in 2014. During his incarceration, he married a Peruvian woman he met in 2010 while she was visiting another inmate. She believed that Joran had genuinely changed and become a better person, describing him as attentive and gentle during their time together. However, this proved to be a facade, as Joran was actually using her for his own benefit and showed no remorse for his past actions. Meanwhile, Natalie Holloway's family was seeking closure. In June 2011, her father, David Holloway, filed a petition in an Alabama court to have Natalie declared legally deceased. Natalie's mother opposed this move, holding on to the hope that Joran would eventually confess to the crime and face trial. After 2 hearings, Judge Alan King ruled in favor of the declaration, stating that all necessary requirements had been met. On January 12, 2012, the court officially declared Natalie deceased. On June 8, 2023, van der Sloot was extradited to the United States and taken to the Hoover City Jail in Alabama. The next day, he was charged with extortion and wire fraud, but he denied all charges. However, on October 18, 2023, he changed his plea and admitted to murdering Natalie Holloway. He confessed to killing her on May 30, 2005, by hitting her with a cinder block after she rejected his advances, and then disposing of her body in the ocean where it was likely consumed by sharks. Although van der Sloot confessed to the crime as part of a plea deal, this confession cannot be used as evidence in court. As a result, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison, which will be served at the same time as his existing prison term in Peru. Despite the confession, Natalie Holloway's disappearance remains an open case in Aruba, and her murder has gone unpunished due to a series of cover-ups, corrupt deals, and bureaucratic delays, despite widespread international attention to the investigation. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Gabriela Alcaino. Gabriela Alcaino was born on May 17, 2001, in Santiago, the capital city of Chile. She was the only child of Federico Alino and Carolina Donosa Campos, and the first grandchild in a large, close-knit family. Her paternal uncle, Rodrigo, who served as her godfather, and her grandfather, Carlos, both adored her deeply, with Carlos regarding her as the central figure in his life. Gabriela grew up in a loving and supportive environment, despite her family's modest means. Her parents, though not wealthy, worked hard to provide her with a good education and upbringing. When Gabriela was 5, her parents divorced, and she lived with her mother, who dedicated herself to raising her. Her father, however, remarried and had 2 younger sons, but he continued to support Gabriela and her mother financially and remained involved in her life. Gabriela was a sweet and friendly child, who was a bit shy but made friends easily. Her gentle nature and lovely appearance earned her admiration from those around her. She excelled academically, enjoyed music, dance, and art, and her parents encouraged her talents. Gabriela cherished her relationships with her younger half-brothers, spending quality time with them at her father's nearby home during weekends and holidays. Overall, Gabriela's childhood was a happy and carefree time, filled with love and support from her family. Gabriela's first love was at the age of 15. She fell for Fabian Chasis Aravan, a fellow student who was a year older. At first, their relationship was innocent and sweet. They would walk together, share ice cream, and steal kisses. Fabian came from a good family with well-respected parents who valued education and raised him to be a good person. However, Fabian was a quiet and private person who struggled with social interactions. He would avoid eye contact and turn away from others, leading many to think he was just shy. Gabriela's father met Fabian and thought he was a calm, dependable, and responsible young man. He had a serious talk with Fabian, asking him to take care of Gabriela, and Fabian promised to do so. Initially, Fabian made an effort to be attentive and caring. However, as time passed, a different side of Fabian emerged. He became controlling and cruel, revealing a darker aspect of his personality. Fabian's controlling behavior dominated the relationship. He was intensely jealous and dictated who Gabriela could and couldn't interact with. He monitored her phone activity, insisting on instant responses to his calls and messages, regardless of the time. If she failed to comply, he would throw tantrums, displaying childish and abusive behavior. During the first 6 months of their relationship, Gabriela attempted to downplay Fabian's frequent outbursts of anger and jealousy, believing they would eventually subside. Blinded by her love for him, she tried to meet all his demands and held on to the hope that he would revert to the caring and gentle person she initially fell in love with. Fabian's behavior became increasingly irritable, volatile, and aggressive. He emotionally drained Gabriela, progressing from verbal abuse to physical mistreatment. He would slap her, pull her hair, or grab her hands, often leaving no visible marks. However, bruises would occasionally appear on her wrists and shoulders, evidence of Fabian's rough handling. Gabriela tried to hide her situation, but her loved ones noticed her depressed state and frequent tears. She was no longer her usual cheerful and outgoing self, instead withdrawing from friends and avoiding contact with people Fabian had forbidden her from seeing. Gabriela repeatedly tried to end her relationship with Fabian, but he would not let her go. Despite her efforts to break free, he would pressure her into getting back together. This cycle of breaking up and reuniting continued for over a year, marked by Fabian's stalking, threats, and harassment. In 2017, Fabian got into trouble for physically attacking a classmate outside of school. Although the details of the incident were unclear, he was accused of mistreatment and assault, which could have led to jail time. However, the case was settled out of court, and Fabian was expelled from school. He was forced to complete his education through homeschooling. When Gabriella finally decided to end the relationship for good, Fabian became angry and desperate. He apologized and promised to change, begging her to take him back. However, when she refused, he began to stalk and harass her. He would show up at her school or home, even attempting to climb into her room through the window. He bombarded her with dozens of calls, texts, voice messages, and social media messages, trying to intimidate her into resuming their relationship. Gabriella was determined to end the relationship, despite Fabian's erratic behavior. His messages veered wildly from apologetic to threatening, but she remained resolute. However, Fabian's actions were unpredictable and frightening. He would often vanish for weeks, giving Gabriella a glimmer of hope that he had moved on, only to reappear and resume his harassment. Fabian's behavior was relentless and intrusive. He would follow Gabriella everywhere, showing up unexpectedly and causing public scenes. His outbursts were loud and intimidating, leaving Gabriella feeling anxious and fearful. As a result, she became reluctant to be alone, always seeking the company of friends or family after school. She would often meet her mother at work and travel home with her, or ask her father or uncle to accompany her on trips. This constant vigilance took a toll on Gabriella, leaving her exhausted and drained over several months. A devastating series of events began to unfold for the Elcano family when a burglar broke into the home of Federico's second wife, taking her life in a tragic turn of events. At the time, the children were at school and Federico was at work, leaving her alone and vulnerable. Fortunately, the perpetrator, a neighbor with a prior conviction, was apprehended immediately. Gabriella and her mother rallied around Federico, offering emotional support and helping him care for the children during this difficult time. Although Gabriella's thoughts were temporarily diverted from Fabian, who had gone missing around the same time, she remained focused on her own goals. She was busy preparing for entrance exams, hoping to secure a spot at one of Santiago's most prestigious universities, where she aspired to study journalism or advertising. However, this tragedy was only the beginning of a series of heartbreaking events that would soon befall the Elcano family. In May 2018, Fabian suddenly re-emerged, beginning a campaign of obsessive stalking that made Gabriella feel unsafe in all aspects of her life. He was able to access her property by climbing over the fence and even showed up at places she regularly visited, such as the supermarket and the mall. By early June, Gabriella was so alarmed by his behavior that she sent screenshots of her disturbing messages with Fabian to her two closest friends, including audio recordings where he explicitly threatened her and demanded they restart their relationship. Gabriella was secretly living in fear for her own safety and that of her loved ones, but she chose not to share her concerns with her family to avoid causing them unnecessary worry. On June 10, 2018, the Alino family came together to celebrate a milestone birthday, Carlos's 80th. Tragically, this joyful gathering would turn out to be the last day of life for Gabriella and her mother, Carolina. The evening had begun on a happy note, with the house filled with laughter, music, and the warmth of a big family meal. As they celebrated Carlos's special day, everyone wished him good health and many more years to come. Gabriella played with her younger brothers and her uncle Rodrigo's children, but despite the festive atmosphere, she seemed somewhat preoccupied and distant. Her uncle noticed her unease and decided to approach her, asking if everything was okay and if something was troubling her. Gabriella gave a sad smile and shrugged, but didn't explain why she was nervous. Her uncle chose not to pry, thinking she would open up when she was ready. However, he later regretted not pressing her for more information. After the party, Federico drove his ex-wife and daughter home. He kissed Gabriella on the forehead, told her he loved her, and reassured her that she could always count on him for support. He then returned home with his younger children. Tragically, this was the last time he saw his eldest daughter and first wife alive. In the early hours of June 11th, a horrific crime took place. Fabian, armed with a hunting knife, climbed over the fence of his ex-girlfriend's house. He planned to sneak into Gabriella's bedroom through the window and attack her. However, just as he was about to enter, the lights turned on and the back door creaked open. Carolina, who had been unable to sleep, had gotten up to investigate the noise. Fabian pounced on her, pushing her back inside, and began stabbing her repeatedly. Fabian brutally stabbed his Carolina 36 times, with most of the wounds inflicted on her chest, neck, and head. This attack was fatal and left her with no chance of survival. Carolina only managed to scream a couple of times before falling silent. The noise from the attack woke up Gabriella, who rushed downstairs to see what was happening. As she went down, she saw Fabian, covered in blood and clearly enraged. He caught hold of her and dragged her down. Gabriella was desperately trying to call the emergency services with her phone, but she couldn't make the call. In a horrific act, Fabian attacked Carolina and stabbed her once in the chest, piercing her heart and instantly killing her. He then moved her body to the kitchen. After the murder, Fabian tried to cover his tracks by wiping away his fingerprints and cleaning the bloody footprints. He also washed himself and the knife in the bathroom. After cleaning up, Fabian left the house quietly around 5:30 a.m. without being noticed by the neighbors. Following the event, Federico appeared unaffected. However, concerns grew when Carolina, typically a reliable and communicative colleague, missed work for 2 consecutive days without answering her phone. Her employer contacted Federico, asking him to find out what had happened to Carolina. When questioned, Federico was surprised and claimed to have called Carolina, but she was unreachable, as was Gabriella, whose phone was off. Next, Federico phoned his brother, Rodrigo, but Rodrigo stated that he had neither seen nor heard from the missing individuals since their friend's birthday. Following the phone call, Federico decided to pay a visit to Carolina's home. The property appeared uninhabited. Nonetheless, Carolina's vehicle remained in the garage. Without forcibly entering, despite possessing a spare key, Federico merely checked on the status of the property. Federico called the police and asked them to check the house, but he didn't enter himself because he was afraid of what he might find. The police officers were puzzled by this, especially since he had a key. When they finally entered the house at 11 a.m., they found the lifeless bodies of Carolina and Gabriella on the kitchen floor, surrounded by pools of blood. Despite the obvious fact that the women had been dead for over a day, Federico was overcome with grief and irrationally demanded that the police call an ambulance to save them. The police had to calm Federico down, but his behavior raised suspicions, and they took him outside to a police car for questioning. When he tried to leave the car and found the door locked, he became agitated and demanded to know why. It was then that he realized he was the main suspect in the double homicide. Federico was shocked and devastated by this turn of events, unable to comprehend how he could be suspected of killing his own daughter. Rodrigo arrived shortly after and was equally shocked to learn that his brother had not been released. He was also struggling to come to terms with the investigation revealed that Gabriella's friends reported that she was being stalked by her ex-boyfriend, Fabian. Screenshots of his threatening messages and voice recordings, which included a disturbing phrase, "It's easier to take her life than to let her go," were also obtained. This came as a shock to Federico, Gabriella's father, who recalled that Fabian seemed pleasant when they first met, despite his daughter's failed attempts to break up with him. The contrast between the heinous crime and the normalcy of Fabian's daily life, where he spent time with family and friends and posted light-hearted photos on social media, made his crime all the more inconceivable. After being taken into custody, Fabian responded to allegations with pretended astonishment and anguish, falsely claiming his innocence and feigning affection for Gabriella. Fabian had gotten rid of the object used to commit the murder and thrown away some clothes with blood on them. However, there were still small drops of blood on his shoes, and footprints matching his shoes were found at the scene of the crime. Additionally, 4 of Gabriella's classmates said they heard Fabian threaten her, saying it would be easier to kill her than let her go. Because of the evidence and what the witnesses said, Fabian admitted to the crime, but tried to make himself look like a lover who was deeply hurt. The defendant claimed that his intention was not to harm Gabriella, but rather to have a conversation with her. However, the situation escalated, and he ultimately treated her mother as an unwanted witness. He struggled to provide a reasonable explanation for bringing a hunting knife to the encounter, which was supposedly meant to be a conversation. Following the autopsy and other necessary examinations, the victims' bodies were released to their family for burial. A large crowd gathered at the funeral to pay their respects to the deceased and offer condolences to their loved ones. Gabriella was laid to rest in a white dress she had always wanted to wear but never had the chance to. Coralina was buried in a closed casket due to the severe mutilation of her face. Fabian's family hired a skilled lawyer who developed a strong defense strategy, aiming to secure a minimal sentence for his client. During the initial court hearings, the lawyer highlighted Fabian's young age and clean record, pointing out that the attack on his classmate had been resolved outside of court. However, the victim's family pushed for a more severe charge of femicide, which was rejected by the prosecution due to the specific requirements of Chile's law. Since Fabian and the victim were not in a romantic relationship at the time of the crime, the case did not meet the criteria for femicide. The lawyer also argued that Fabian had acted on impulse and was in a state of distress when he committed the crime. As a result, Fabian faced a potential 15-year sentence for the double homicide and assault charges. The victim's family, understandably, demanded the maximum punishment for Fabian. After the initial hearings, the judge gave both the prosecution and defense 6 months to gather evidence. Fabian's lawyer requested his release pending trial, but the judge denied this request, keeping Fabian in custody. Gabriella's father was furious. He lost 2 loved ones to violent deaths. Now, the person responsible for the murders of his ex-wife and daughter might receive a lenient sentence. The defense lawyer tried to blame the victims, and the authorities seemed willing to accept this excuse. In response, Gabriella's father and uncle, along with women's rights groups, proposed Gabriella's Law. This law would broaden the definition of femicide to include intimate partner violence, regardless of whether they was married or cohabiting. The National Office for Women and Gender Equality soon joined the cause, actively pushing for the law. Although the bill faced opposition due to concerns that it could lead to new charges and stricter penalties for perpetrators already in prison, feminist groups nationwide rallied behind the Alino family. They organized marches and demonstrations in support of Gabriella's Law. In August 2019, a year and 3 months after the tragic murders, significant changes were made to Chile's femicide law. Known as Gabriella's Law, these amendments aimed to strengthen the country's response to violence against women. The law now defines femicide as any act of violence, injury, or murder committed against a woman due to hatred based on her gender, regardless of the relationship between the victim and the perpetrator. Additionally, the law considers it an aggravating circumstance if the victim is a minor or has health issues. In April 2022, Fabian Ceres went on trial for attacking his ex-girlfriend and her mother 4 years earlier. Thanks to Gabriella's Law, the defense had limited options. Fabian was charged with femicide under aggravating circumstances because one of the victims was a minor, as well as with double homicide and assault. On April 20th, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After the verdict was delivered, Federico and Rodrigo spoke to the court, expressing their gratitude to the judges for their fair decision. They acknowledged that no punishment could restore the life of their loved ones, Carolina and Gabriella, but emphasized that a life sentence for the perpetrator would serve as a safeguard, protecting other women from suffering a similar tragic fate. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lindsay Cutshall. Lindsay Cutshall was born in 1982 in the small town of White Eyes, Ohio, to a devoutly Christian family. Her father was a pastor, and she was raised with strong religious values. Despite her strict upbringing, Lindsay was an adventurous and active child who enjoyed sports and later developed a passion for hiking and extreme tourism. After completing her education, Lindsay attended Appalachian Bible College in West Virginia, where she honed her outdoor skills. She regularly went on hikes, climbed mountains, and rafted down rivers, often organizing her own expeditions. Lindsay's dream was to establish a summer camp for children and teenagers, where she could teach them wilderness survival skills, rafting, and other outdoor activities. Jason Allen was born in 1978 in Zeeland, Michigan, to a deeply religious family. As a teenager, he became fascinated with hiking and wilderness survival. Jason was a tall, athletic, and charismatic individual who possessed natural leadership qualities, which drew like-minded people to him. He was passionate about exploring new heights and mastering outdoor skills. Lindsay and Jason met in 2002 during a hiking trip in the Appalachian Mountains. At the time, Lindsay was still a student, while Jason worked as a mountain guide and climbing instructor. They quickly formed a connection after meeting for the first time, leading the young man to ask for her hand in marriage just 6 months later. Both sets of parents gave their approval, and the young man proposed to his girlfriend with a beautiful diamond ring. Shortly after, he gave her a second engagement ring. As a couple, they made ambitious plans for their future. They intended to get married in September 2004 and buy a spacious house to raise a family. But things didn't turn out as expected. Before their wedding, they worked as senior counselors at a Christian summer camp called Rock and Water in California's El Dorado County. Their goal was to gain experience and eventually open their own camp after the wedding. On the Friday evening of August 14th, Lindsay and Jason decided to take a weekend trip to the San Francisco area. Before leaving, they informed their colleagues of their plans and left 2 experienced counselors in charge of the camp, ensuring a smooth transition. They told everyone they would return by Monday, expecting no issues for either themselves or their temporary replacements. With their plan in place, they set off in Lindsay's 1992 red Ford Tempo, and unfortunately, this was the last time anyone saw them alive. By Sunday evening, Jason and Lindsay, both counselors, had not returned to camp, but their absence did not raise immediate concern. It was assumed they would arrive late that night or early Monday. However, when they failed to appear at the Monday morning roll call at 8 a.m. and their phones were unreachable, their colleagues grew worried. The group quickly notified the police and then reached out to Jason and Lindsay's families to inform them about the situation. The parents went to the camp right away to get more information about the incident. Their colleagues were particularly concerned because Jason and Lindsay were known for their reliability and punctuality. If they had encountered any issues, they would have likely found a way to communicate. Upon arriving at the camp, law enforcement officials began questioning their colleagues, but the investigation quickly hit a roadblock. No one knew exactly where Jason and Lindsay had gone. They had planned to explore the San Francisco area, but their love for adventure and extreme activities made it likely that they were in a remote location with no access to communication or civilization. The police decided to wait for 48 hours, allowing the missing couple a window to possibly return home by themselves. In the meantime, concerned relatives and friends didn't want to delay any longer, and therefore decided to start searching. They reached out to everyone in their network, trying to gather information about the last time someone had contact with they. A missing person flyer featuring a photo of they was circulated, asking witnesses to report any potential sightings right away. By Tuesday, law enforcement had joined the search. The main focus was on the San Francisco area, its surrounding suburbs, and nearby localities. However, the large terrain made it challenging to thoroughly search every inch. A friend's insight that they frequently visited the secluded and picturesque rocky beaches led the police to concentrate on these locations. As the search effort dragged on for days, with several bodies found in sleeping bags in the targeted areas, the likelihood of finding them alive decreased significantly. On Wednesday, August 19th, a helicopter patrol spotted 2 bodies in sleeping bags on a remote rocky beach, indicating that the individuals were likely deceased rather than just resting. Upon arriving at the scene, police found a red Ford Tempo parked near a tourist shelter in a steep trail leading to a scenic beach. The car was identified as belonging to missing student Lindsay Cutshall after a database check. As officers descended the trail, they discovered 2 people in sleeping bags, who initially appeared to be sleeping. However, they did not respond to calls or noise. Closer inspection revealed that the individuals, a young man and woman, were deceased, with no signs of life. Preliminary examination suggested that they had been killed by gunshot wounds to the head, and the smell of decomposition indicated they had been there for over a day. All of their belongings, including phones, wallets, bank cards, and cash, were found next to them, ruling out robbery as a motive. The car keys were also visible, eliminating car theft as a motive. Investigators initially believed the deceased were the young couple who had gone missing near San Francisco the previous week. Documents found at the scene confirmed the identities of the victims as Lindsay Cutshall and Jason Allen. However, formal identification by their relatives was still necessary. When the parents arrived, they were overcome with grief upon recognizing the bodies of their children. The investigation led police to rule out initial theories of robbery or carjacking due to the presence of untouched valuables, money, and keys at the scene. Forensic analysis also showed no signs of physical or intimate assault on the bodies, except for the fatal gunshot wounds to the head. It appeared that Lindsay and Jason were peacefully sleeping and did not have time to react to the attack. They showed no signs of trying to defend themselves, escape, or even get out of their sleeping bags, indicating a sudden and deliberate act that was similar to an execution or a revenge killing. The brutal murder of 2 individuals on a secluded beach left investigators with many questions but no clear answers. The beach was difficult to access, and there were no signs of anyone else being in the area. Despite a thorough search, no shell casings were found, leading investigators to believe that the shooter may have taken them or thrown them into the ocean. The fact that the shots were fired at close range into the victim's head suggested that the casings should have been nearby if they hadn't been deliberately moved. A search of the area revealed an empty beer bottle a few meters from the crime scene. This was notable because Lindsay and Jason did not drink alcohol and led a healthy lifestyle, suggesting that the bottle may have belonged to the shooter. The brand of beer was unusual for the area and was more commonly found in a neighboring state. Although it was unclear whether the bottle was connected to the crime, it was considered a significant lead in the investigation. A theory emerged that Lindsay and Jason may have had a confrontation with someone the day before their deaths, and this person may have returned at night with a gun to settle the dispute. Although Jason and Lindsay were known for being friendly, it was possible they may have unknowingly offended someone. Additionally, the shooter may have been intoxicated or mentally unstable. Examination of the bullets found in the victims' skulls showed they came from a rare Marlin rifle, specifically a .45 caliber Model 18, produced in 1994 by Marlin Firearms Company. This type of rifle was typically used for hunting and was often part of a collector's arsenal. This discovery was a significant lead in the investigation, but it remained the only concrete clue at the time. Investigation suggested that the shooter was likely a lone male. He may have been a hunter, collector, or gun enthusiast. To further the investigation, authorities aimed to reconstruct their final route, identify who they may have contacted, and determine when they were last seen alive. Fortunately, They had taken many photos, and their camera was found intact among their belongings, which provided a useful starting point for tracking their movements. A guest book at a tourist cabin near the lookout point, where they had parked their car, contained entries expressing their delight with the weekend getaway. They had also visited a fishing pier about 20 miles away on Saturday, as evidenced by the photographs they took. Police officers returned to the pier and interviewed locals to find people who may have seen something significant. Several people remembered a young couple in a red car who inquired about overnight accommodations but found all 3 nearby hotels fully booked due to peak tourist season. They had dinner at a local restaurant, walked around the area, and took photos before leaving in the evening. According to those who saw and interacted with them, they was friendly, did not engage in any conflicts, and seemed carefree and happy. However, none of the witnesses could recall anything unusual or suspicious. The location where the bodies were found was a protected area, closed to camping. However, the young couple had nowhere else to stay overnight, so they decided to camp on the beach, using sleeping bags instead of a tent. They felt safe on the secluded beach on a warm August night and planned to return to the rock and water camp on Sunday. This information helped investigators narrow down the time frame of their deaths. Since they went to sleep but didn't survive until morning, it's likely they were killed between 11 p.m. on Saturday and dawn on Sunday. Despite the ongoing investigation and public appeals for information, police withheld certain details, including the results of the ballistics analysis. This action was taken to prevent the suspect from being tipped off and getting rid of the murder weapon before the investigation could start. The investigation first focused on a local homeless man who was known to sleep on the beach where the crime occurred. He was found and questioned by police, but despite not having an alibi for the night of the crime, he was not confirmed to be involved. The main reasons for this were that the murder weapon was never found and his DNA did not match the DNA found on a beer bottle discovered at the crime scene. The case went cold for nearly 2 years, but in the spring of 2006, police decided to release more information about the crime, including details about the weapon used. They also offered a $50,000 reward for any information that could help identify the perpetrator and solve the case. Following the public appeal, authorities received over 1,000 calls, but only a few were useful for the investigation. One individual, 26 years old Sean Gallen, drew particular attention from several locals who described him as an aggressive collector of firearms and blades. He was reportedly prone to conflicts, had a history of property damage, and frequently threatened violent behavior. The police investigated Sean Gallen and questioned him because they already knew him from previous incidents involving fights and drunk driving. Upon inspecting his possessions, Sean did possess numerous weapons but did not own the rifle in question. Authorities were unable to verify his whereabouts around the time of the crime due to the year gap, and his DNA did not match the sample found on the beer bottle at the crime scene, forcing his release. Meanwhile, international authorities were investigating another individual, 61 years old Joseph Henry Burgess, who made locals nervous due to his tendency to carry firearms and exhibit aggressive behavior. Burgess was described as erratic, often claiming he received orders from God, sparking suspicion that he could be the perpetrator. Joseph Burgess was living in Canada in the late 1970s, feeling lost and without a clear sense of purpose or direction in his life. In 1978, he joined the Children of God commune, presenting himself as a deeply devoted individual. Those around him considered him excessively zealous. A rivalry with 2 young members escalated into hostility, and shortly after, both individuals were found dead with multiple close-range gunshot wounds to the head. The circumstances of their deaths were particularly notable. Their bodies were discovered in sleeping bags on a beach, suggesting they were shot while asleep. By the time the authorities arrived, Joseph had disappeared. Although evidence left behind implicated him in the crime, he had already fled to the United States, crossing the border illegally. Joseph managed to evade capture for nearly 25 years until the police linked him to a double homicide in California. However, the opportunity to question him was lost when a shootout occurred during his arrest, resulting in the deaths of both a police sergeant and Joseph, who initiated the gunfire. This ultimately unresolved case remains shrouded in mystery. A 35-year-old man named Seamus Gallen was killed by his younger brother, Sean Gallen. The brothers had gotten into an argument, during which Sean, who was under the influence of illicit substances, shot Seamus 3 times with a gun. Sean had a history with the police, having been previously investigated for a double murder on a beach, but was released due to lack of evidence. Since then, Sean had been in trouble with the law twice for causing property damage and making threats, but only received fines. It was also discovered that Sean was an avid hunter and enjoyed making knives and other bladed weapons. People who knew him described him as antisocial, aggressive, and unpredictable. After killing his brother, Sean tried to run away but was caught almost immediately. The police decided to take another look at Sean's possible involvement in a crime that happened 13 years ago. They found useful information on his social media page, where he had posted pictures of his large collection of weapons and talked about his supposed psychic abilities. According to his posts, Sean believed he was on a special mission and was receiving instructions from outer space. Sean's behavior initially led police to suspect that he had serious mental health issues. He refused to cooperate with the investigation, spoke incoherently, and maintained his innocence. A new lead was found by investigators who examined private messages on the deceased brother's social media page, something no one anticipated. In 2006, a $50,000 reward had been offered for information about a double homicide case. Sean's former girlfriend had messaged his brother, suggesting that she could claim the reward by turning Sean in. It appeared that both the girlfriend and the brother had knowledge about the case, but they had chosen to remain silent. Unfortunately, it was no longer possible to question either of them, as the brother had been shot and the girlfriend had died in a car accident 2 years earlier. However, when Sean was shown the printouts of the messages between his former girlfriend and his brother, he made a shocking confession. Despite his initial denials, Sean began to provide a detailed account of the events surrounding the double homicide. His recollection of the details was vivid, even though more than 13 years had passed since the crime occurred. One evening, a man left his house with a Marlin rifle, planning to hunt in a nearby wooded area. However, after wandering aimlessly for a couple of hours, he decided to head down to a nearby beach, which he believed was a good spot to find wild boars. As he walked along the shore, he came across 2 sleeping bags with a young man and woman asleep inside. He stood there watching them for several minutes, when suddenly he heard voices in his head telling him to kill them. The man claimed that this was a mission from outer space that he had to carry out. So, he pointed his rifle directly at the young man's head and fired, instantly killing him. The sound of the shot woke she, but before she could even process what was happening, the man fired again, killing her as well. He then picked up the spent casings and put them in an empty beer can he had been carrying. Later, he threw the can into some bushes in his father's backyard, where he also hid the rifle, asking his father to keep it for him. Sean's father hid the murder weapon in the cellar of his old barn without asking any questions. Remarkably, Sean's account of the crime was later confirmed. When the barn eventually collapsed, the rifle was discovered at the site, and a beer can with shell casings was still hidden in the overgrown bushes in the backyard. The property's abandonment after Sean's father passed away in 2009 had helped preserve these key pieces of evidence. A beer bottle found on the beach was initially considered evidence, but it was later discovered to be unrelated to the crime. Sean claimed that voices in his head ordered him to commit violent acts and that he was not aware of his actions when he committed the crime. His defense argued that Sean was mentally ill and unfit to stand trial. The court relied on expert psychiatrists to assess the validity of these claims. The psychiatric evaluation found that Sean did indeed suffer from multiple mental health disorders, which were exacerbated by his use of alcohol and prohibited substances. However, the evaluation also showed that at the time of the crime, Sean acted with deliberation and careful planning, fully aware of his actions and the need to cover his tracks to avoid detection. Specifically, Sean deliberately killed the young man first, knowing that she would be less able to resist or defend herself if anything went wrong. Sean carefully removed the casings and handed the rifle to his father, instructing him to conceal it. Although psychiatrists diagnosed Sean with mental issues, they concluded he was mentally fit to stand trial and be held accountable for his actions. Notably, his family and former girlfriend were aware of or suspected his involvement in the double homicide, yet none of them reported him to the police. Sean's trial took place in the spring of 2019, nearly 15 years after the double homicide. On June 17, 2019, he was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without parole, plus an additional 94 years for killing his brother in 2017. He is currently serving his sentence in a special prison unit for inmates with mental disorders. Due to his continued claims of hearing voices and aggressive behavior, he is closely monitored to prevent harm to himself or others. The motive behind the double homicide was never established. According to reports, Sean randomly encountered they sleeping on the beach and decided to end their lives without apparent reason.